Hello guys, this is your friend and we are back with a new fanfic. Sakura was right. Kakashi had been positively miffed when Lady Tsunade and Sakura promptly reverse summoned an entire group of ninja, via the Slug Express as Sasuke had so eloquently put it, and marched them all straight into his office at 2 hours past sunrise. Kakashi and Shikamaru, who looked as if they had only recently returned themselves from their mini vacation in Sunagaku, practically leaned over from behind each of their designated towers of late paperwork to drop their jaws in astonishment at the suddenly cramped room. Sakura smiled guiltily, Sasuke humphed humorously, and Tsunade, who had insisted on coming along to see the sixth's reaction, cackled loudly and pointed a finger at Kakashi who, in return, frowned at the former Hokage with obvious envy about life on the other side of retirement. Tsunade's laughter grew louder when Sasuke didn't hesitate to activate his Rinnegan and reveal another 25 fear-stricken members of Zenshin who clung to their reunited acquaintances. Sakura caught Sasuke's eyes with her own when the newcomers recoiled from the Uchiha's presence in obvious traumatic fear, and Sakura suddenly became highly suspicious that they had endured a tortuous genjutsu for at least a small length of time before they had been ejected into another dimension. Kakashi sighed loudly for all to hear and leaned back in his chair in disbelief at the increasing crowd of convicts. To Sakura's amazement, they all looked down at their feet in the Hokage's presence, even the loudest of them, quiet now that they were among 5 of the most powerful ninja in the Leaf Village. They hadn't even met Naruto yet. They knew their inadequate skills and ninjutsu would get them nowhere here. Sakura rubbed the back of her neck awkwardly as she pushed forward through the gathering of people who had been intent on killing her just 24 hours ago. Some sneered at her as she passed while the newcomers stared openly at her in shock. She felt Sasuke's narrowed eyes on her back as she made her way through the pit of vipers. Please tell me you didn't just bring 50 more criminals into my village, Kakashi frowned at her. It was technically 51. But she wasn't going to add that additional number right now. It would have been 52 if they hadn't woken up this morning to discover a member of Zenshin missing to the shadows of the Shikatsu forest. Toka had taken the risk after all, it seemed, rising at some point in the night to face the terrors within, gambling his life on the small likelihood he might survive the forest for a chance at a future as a father. Sakura had silently wished him luck upon discovery, for Tabi's sake, but she wasn't going to be fool enough to provide him any sort of assistance. There was always the risk of him returning to whatever was left of Zenshin now, even though Sakura wasn't too worried about it in the long run. She'd handle it as it came. Kakashi continued his scowling reprimand. I had thought at least half of this group would be going to Sunagaku when I signed off on that. When she placed the mentioned scrolls with each of their names and sentencing on his desk, and smiled again, saying, I sort of gave them the choice, Kakashi gave her the most affronted look he had ever given his student. She knew he was wanting to respond with something like, on whose authority? But then she saw his next train of thought cross his face, register behind his eyes, and evolve into acceptance with another resigned sigh. Team 7 was as close as Kakashi would ever get to having children. The 3 of them took advantage of their old sensei at every turn, especially since he became Hokage with much more influence at his disposal. Just when Sakura thought Kakashi would finally put one of Team 7 in their place, Sakura could practically see when Kakashi weighed the request and caved like an overfond parent, deciding that there was very little he wouldn't do for the 3 ninja he had almost lost at one point or another in the past. He pulled Sakura's scroll across the desk like it was the heaviest thing in the world, unfurling it slowly, as if he dreaded the finality of the contents inside. I don't know why you're laughing, Tsunade, since it says here that all 27, he looked up at the assembly Sasuke had revealed, double that, now, are to attend the mental health clinic you are currently in charge of. In addition to any medical attention they might need beforehand. The laughter did stop then as Tsunade opened her mouth and swung her head in Sakura's direction, obviously not aware of that particular clause in Sakura's sentencing. Shikamaru laughed under his breath when the 5th released a sigh to compete with the current Hokages. Sakura just giggled lightly, continuing to blush deeply and smile guiltily at her two former masters. Well, I will definitely help with that this evening, Lady Tsunade. I'd like to check up on Isao, as well. He did make it back here with you guys, correct? She easily got distracted when her mind wandered to a patient she cared deeply for. And it was Isao, the young boy she had gotten quite attached to over the past few months. She hadn't been this emotionally invested in a while. It was easy to spiral when her work was involved, and Sakura sometimes found herself completely forgetting everyone else present. One thing at a time, Kakashi sighed, turning to Shikamaru, who flinched under the Hokage's sudden attention. It usually meant that he was about to have work to do, work that the Hokage was redirecting to him, and Sakura silently wondered to herself how anything got done between the two. And then she was thinking of Naruto, the soon-to-be Hokage in training, and was suddenly overcome with agita at the future ping-pong match of responsibility between the two laziest ninja of their year as Shikamaru continued his duty of chief aide to the Hokage. Shikamaru, please escort this caravan to the prison hold, for now. Arrange for them to be brought food and water, and whatever basics can be provided for them while we assemble a team of medics to see to them. I'll have to think of where to house and facilitate them in the meantime. Lady Fifth, do you mind assist? Yeah, I got it, Tsunade sighed, and Sakura laughed awkwardly at the former Hokage's inability to take orders since she had been so used to dishing them out for 5 years. Come on kid, let's get this over with, she said to Shikamaru, and he slowly rose to his feet with a sigh, mumbling something about his unfortunate lot with Hokages. This way, Shikamaru waved them all behind him and they filed out after him like ants, Tsunade on their heels. They must have heard the rumors of the Fifth's temper and strength, then, Sakura thought, as nobody took a step out of line. Sakura couldn't believe her luck as a few of them even looked back to her for reassurance, fear of the change in Warden crossing their features. On her way out the door, Tsunade gave Sakura the, "You'll be following shortly to help with this look," and Sakura nodded out of the teenage habit of student compliance. This left Sakura alone with a silent, brooding Sasuke in the back of the room, and a silent, exhausted Kakashi at the front. Sakura suddenly felt like an uncomfortable sandwich. She cleared her throat as Kakashi stood and made his way around his desk to stand before her, placing a hand on her shoulder, a different, relieved sort of sigh escaping this time. I'm glad to see that you are okay. Sasuke immediately scoffed to himself at that declaration, an ejection of air from his nose, and Sakura and Kakashi both looked over at him as he stood perched against the wall as still as if he hadn't just made a noise at all. Kakashi looked back to her, gripping her shoulder encouragingly before releasing her altogether. Sometimes I miss the girl who fainted multiple times during that first bell test. Where has she gone? She certainly isn't before me, now. Hasn't been for years. Sakura wanted to laugh at that and tell her sensei that if she remembered correctly, she was fainting because she thought Sasuke had been hurt and would probably do so again under more authentic life-threatening circumstances if they occurred in the future. And that she was still prone to fainting spells if she got worked up enough. But her sensei was giving her a compliment right now and she didn't feel like reminding him otherwise at the moment. She smiled and thanked her sensei. Is this all of them? He asked, as the situation finally settled. Not quite, Sakura confessed. I never learned the exact number, but we might have more luck with interrogations this time. I do know that there's still someone out there, a man named Mozai, and who knows how many more. Gaara got the same name from the Shade, the sixth declared, and Sakura's eyes widened, not ever having expected the Shade to be the one to give that up. Mako hadn't been given the name at all. We thought he was the leader at first. So did I, until Mako told me otherwise, Sakura confirmed, but remembered her shock when Mako had told her that the organization worked in cells similar to the Akatsuki, the Shade being in charge of those who had attacked her back in the deserts of Suna. We can investigate it further and send a team to handle it this time, Kakashi reassured her. In the meantime, I'm just glad the two of you are home. No need. I'm sure they'll either disappear or come for me eventually. And if I could handle the others, I'm sure I can handle a few more when the time comes. Kakashi raised an eyebrow, and she caught him glancing over to Sasuke, whose stare she could feel straight into her back. She cleared her throat. If that's everything, Sensei, can I be excused? I just want to check on Isao now. Kakashi nodded emphatically, gesturing for Sakura to go ahead and take her leave. She turned quickly, making eye contact with Sasuke before she made to exit. He wasn't going to follow her, and Sakura realized suddenly that he was intending to hang back to talk to Kakashi on his own. Her stomach turned a little at that, wondering what he might have to say without her, but he nodded and boldly said, I'll find you after while. And her mood instantly lifted, and she nodded back, trying not to grin stupidly in the presence of an ever-watching sensei who always knew more than he should. It was like if Sakura smiled, then Kakashi's Sharingan-less eyes could still see straight through her like a parent who knew their child was keeping a secret. She cleared her throat and left them, saving her face-splitting smile for the hallway as she skipped to find Isao. Kakashi was back to sighing when Sakura left, and Sasuke's eyes landed on him like sharp kunai. In contrast to Sakura's 10-year change since the bell test, Sasuke was giving Kakashi that same hateful stare that made Kakashi reminiscent of the relentless youth who had always been determined, always had a purpose, and never really cared whether he came off as rude to anyone else. Kakashi was used to this. Sasuke had dealt with him a few days ago in the presence of the cage. If I have to watch someone who I love die, sacrificing themselves for the sake of the Leaf Village, again, the person who I am now won't survive it. What's left of the shinobi world will either fall to the Otsutsuki race in my absence, or it will fall to the person I will become. That will be its fate if you keep me here and she dies, Kakashi. Those were the words Sasuke had used to manipulate the Hokage and Kazekage both when the Uchiha was being retained against his will. When Sasuke had uttered such words before the very ninja who had given him another chance, Kakashi had felt like a stone of foreboding had fallen into the pit of his stomach. After Sasuke had been allowed to leave, a very tense discussion followed. Gaara had raised his concerns once again about Sasuke, to which Kakashi had no immediate response, because Kakashi, himself, didn't know if Sasuke would ever be capable of turning on them all once more. He was unpredictable, the Uchiha. His attachments either tethered him to goodness or dropped him right into the depths of darkness. Kakashi had believed Sasuke to be returned for good, had taken up his self-sacrificial role of a journey of atonement in order to ensure that no threat could be posed to the shinobi world again. But Sasuke's response to the situation with Sakura contradicted his very goal, didn't it? Where did his allegiances lie? Who could guarantee that Sasuke would never fall again? Naruto had apologized to both Gaara and Kakashi on his behalf, saying, "You don't have to worry. He doesn't mean that. He's just upset and concerned. He and Sakura, there. Don't make excuses for Naruto," Gaara had responded. Threats like that have to be taken seriously. Especially from him. He's not like that anymore, Naruto insisted. He's under a lot of stress. Think about what we've asked him to do for the world. He thought he'd never get a chance to pursue happiness like this. And now you're letting Sakura go and face a threat to her life all by herself. And then Naruto was glaring at Kakashi, too. You taught us about teamwork, remember? That was our very first lesson from you, and you let her go alone. Has being Hokage made you lose sight of that? He wouldn't have had to make that threat if you remembered that lesson yourself in the first place. And it felt like a punch to Kakashi's gut. Gaara had frowned as Naruto spoke and he had turned back to the cage and added, "I'll handle it. It won't, but if it ever gets that bad again, I'll be here to stop him. However many times it takes. I have already made that promise to him, myself." The conversations had ended after that, and Kakashi had holed up into the guest quarters of the Sand, staying through the night before making the trip back to Konoha. The Jinchuriki was boisterous and loud for the sake of their tag-along, Isao, who nervously chose the path forward into a new land, carrying his entire life's belongings in one rucksack. He looked to Naruto as a sense of comfort, but the following night, after Isao had fallen asleep beside their fire, Naruto had dropped his faux excitement and stared up into the stars a long time as he quietly kept to himself. The following morning, as they stood outside the AN gates, Naruto spoke his next request slowly. "Don't tell Sakura." Naruto had breathed between them, a hand coming up to rub the back of his neck. "Whenever she comes back, don't tell her what he said. She deserves this newfound happiness with Sasuke. I'll talk to him." And that had been the end of it. Until now. Because despite Naruto's assurance and his promise to talk to Sasuke himself, Kakashi was feeling responsible again. As Sasuke's sensei, Kakashi had taken him aside before, explaining to the youth how he, too, had already lost all his loved ones to the shinobi way of life and that Sasuke should give up on revenge. And now, he felt the need to remind Sasuke of the hard lesson he had thought the Uchiha had already learned. If you want to remain in the good graces of the Kages, you shouldn't carelessly throw around threats. It wasn't well received. Your reputation isn't going to improve if you still come across as an insubordinate. Naruto and I had to do some damage control after you left. Sasuke scoffed aloud again, and Kakashi bristled when the Uchiha didn't even seem to listen to the beginning of his lecture, falling straight into that sardonic voice as he said, "I hope this next threat is better received, because I don't plan on breaking the habit today." Kakashi raised an unexpected eyebrow at that statement. A threat to him? He shook his head as he prepared himself. He didn't like where this was going. "You sent her to a brothel," Sasuke stated contemptuously, narrowing his only visible eye. "Ah, that." Kakashi supposed he would be hearing about this from one of the boys. Hadn't quite expected it to be Sasuke, though. Kakashi hated that part of Sakura's plan. Was very tempted to force her to stay with them in Suna when she had confessed it to him. However, as both a Hokage and someone with a very fair estimation of Sakura's capabilities, the plan had made sense. He had full faith that she would be able to protect herself and execute her plan flawlessly. When Kakashi had raised concerns, Sakura did specifically tell him that the bathhouse was just a stage and she didn't quite plan on performing the entire act that went with that stage. She had walked him through step by step. And he trusted her, as a medic, to be able to execute the anesthetic approach to captivation flawlessly. That was her plan. It sounded foolproof, and she assured me she would be safe. No one here is forced or asked to do that sort of thing for a mission. It's been a thing of the past since Tsunade became Hokage. She made sure of it. Except for the rare occasion, on a voluntary basis. It ends, Sasuke drawled, interrupting him once again. For everyone. Today. No matter the occasion. Kakashi sighed, feeling like Sasuke wasn't quite understanding that his former sensei wasn't saying he condoned Leaf Ninja using their bodies as a means of success in a mission. That wasn't what Sakura had been planning to do, it was the illusion of that to get inside. Or Naruto will hear more about Sakura's recent mission himself, Sasuke finished, finally delivering that threat he promised. And Kakashi really did feel more like a father than a cage. An old man who had just had one troublesome son threaten him with the other, just as problematic, one. Meanwhile, the second son was yelling at him about sending Sakura, the daughter in this ridiculous scenario. And foregoing all their training about teamwork. This entire thing made Kakashi feel like a figurehead, a reminder that Sasuke had begun his covert cage reign long before Naruto would begin his official one, and Naruto, who acted like Hokage before he had even started. Not to mention Sakura forming plans on her own and expecting Kakashi's approval to follow through with them. If they only just saw him as someone to manipulate as they saw fit, then they should just relieve him of such duties and provide him the retirement check he wanted. But alas, he was still in charge. Kakashi loved the village and would die protecting it, but he knew the title of 6th Hokage was a temporary placement holder until Naruto was ready to take over, and Sasuke and Shikamaru with him. I agree that it shouldn't be allowed, Kakashi informed him, just so there was no confusion about this topic. Sakura was successful because of the disguise. She assured me she wasn't going to go as far as that. I never would have let her go if she had. Do you think she would have told you if she had planned it? She did more than she should have had to simply because she was in that situation. And that's my point. What did she do? You're not saying? Kakashi asked, suddenly feeling like his stomach was twisting violently. Would she have lied to him? Has Naruto been right? Had he just sent Sakura without a team into a situation Kakashi shouldn't have? You don't get to know what, Sasuke hissed. Because if I hadn't followed her, then no one would know. Kakashi's stomach turned again as he thought about what Sakura might feel obligated to do to complete a mission she had proposed herself because it had been about her. Would she have done anything to ensure it was a success? Would she have felt like it was her personal sacrifice to make in order to obtain the members of the organization simply because she was their target? A part of the Hokage's duties came with giving orders and entrusting missions to the ninja the Hokage believed would deliver and follow through with those orders. He looked back at Sasuke differently, then. Kakashi always thought he might be the one to know his students best in the beginning. But Sasuke knew a great deal more now about personal sacrifice because he, himself, had taken that road as his ninja path. Maybe Sasuke understood Sakura in her most recent mission on a level the rest of them could not, simply because it was his own personal convictions being mirrored back to him in the girl who loved him. Maybe it was that particular fact that had Sasuke braving to threaten the Hokage again, because he somewhat felt responsible for her choice. Sasuke was doing more than threatening Kakashi, he was asking him to stop Sakura in circumstances like this in the future. To continue to look after her as he had always done as her sensei. Because he was going to be gone and couldn't do it himself. And why do you suddenly care so much about Sasuke? Kakashi prompted, already knowing the answer but wanting to force the Uchiha to admit it. It was the truth Sasuke needed to acknowledge outright before Kakashi confronted the Uchiha further. Naruto, I could understand, but until 2 days ago in the Cage's meeting room, you've always acted like you couldn't really be bothered. There's no point in telling you what you already know, so move on with it, Sasuke interrupted and Kakashi nodded thoughtfully. So, he was past the point of denying his growing attachment to Sakura. Kakashi's thoughts returned to that ever-growing connection. Just a few days ago, Kakashi had been beaming with joy at having caught his two students together in a shared room in Sunagaku. But now, after Sasuke's threat, the Hokage was concerned about it. As much as he wished otherwise, maybe the opening of the Uchiha's heart wouldn't turn out to be a good thing after all. Sasuke cared about Naruto. He cared about Sakura. But she had become something more over the course of the last few months at the very least, if not before that. He suddenly thought of Obito and Rin, and what Rin's death had done to Obito. Would a matter of a few months change Sasuke's bearings and weaken his resolve about a peaceful future in a worst-case scenario? While Sasuke was complying with responses to his questions, Kakashi pushed further. Naruto says that we don't have to worry about the threat you made to the shinobi world in Sunagaku. Is that true? Being a shinobi comes with risks. Sakura is a frontline medic and more. There is always a gamble of her safety. As there is for me. And for Naruto, as well. There was silence as Sasuke stared beyond Kakashi and into the faces of the Hokage mountain at his back. Kakashi wasn't certain if Sasuke was going to even respond at first, but then he reached some sort of conclusion in his mind. If Naruto exists, the world will never have to worry. We have the same goal. I will protect the leaf. More so now than ever, I must find out everything I can about the Otsutsuki. I've sacrificed everything for that. Not everything, it seems, Kakashi said aloud and Sasuke's scowl deepened. Everything and more, Sasuke corrected. My future and hers. It was a brutal truth that made Kakashi frown in contemplation. Being connected to Sasuke would bring Sakura a future of suffering and sacrifices of her own. And then Sasuke was making his exit, excusing himself as he always did. And as Kakashi watched him leave, he thought of something else. Even more than Sakura, Kakashi was suddenly concerned about another unspoken factor. The Uchiha may not go to such lengths again on behalf of his current bonds, but the ultimate attachment to those who might be born from this newfound happiness between teammates, that might be different. The loss of a friend is one thing. The loss of a spouse to another. But the loss of a child was a pain more terrible than the first two. And definitely one to seek vengeance over. Would anyone truly be able to stop him then? But Kakashi didn't say this aloud to Sasuke, hoping that Naruto would always be the insurance the shinobi world needed to keep the Uchiha in the light. Use the Uchiha compound, Sasuke called back to him as if he had just thought of something else to add. Build the clinic, the wards, or a prison. I don't care. Whatever she wants, you can build it there, but put the Uchiha crest on it. I leave tomorrow to hunt down the rest of Zenshin, so there will be more coming if I don't end up having to kill them first. Kakashi raised an eyebrow at Sasuke's parting words. The Uchiha had just given him permission to use his ancestral clan territory to expand Sakura's professional reach and display the symbol of Uchiha pride once more. And told him he would have even more prisoners to take care of. Kakashi sighed. The sun was high and bright over the ninja academy when Sakura finally found Isao and Naruto. They stood just outside the red doors of the building, that leaf symbol towering above the entrance, crippling Sakura with nostalgia as she approached. That same lonely swing hung from the tree just outside. She was glad to not see Naruto sitting in that swing anymore. Now, he was serving as a personal tour guide, introducing Isao to Iruka-sensei, who had been promoted from homeroom teacher to Konoha Academy headmaster. Iruka was teasing Naruto's past behavior lightheartedly, to which Naruto was guffawing loudly over or cheesing bashfully at the accusations. Konohamaru was also among the group, and Sakura was shocked at how much he had grown as well. Full of reminiscent wistfulness, Sakura hung back a moment despite how much she wanted to rush to them. Isao's wide smile was just as vibrant as the others, and Sakura felt relieved to see him surrounded with a group of men who had a history of supporting and looking up to one another. It was such a contrast to the treatment he had grown up with, and Sakura's concern for Isao's adjustment to life in the leaf lightened considerably, knowing that this group of ninja would be there for him. Isao's small voice carried her to the wind. What if no one likes me? What if I am alone? And she saw Naruto crouch down in front of him and grab each of his shoulders. Impossible. But even if they don't like you, that's okay. Even if you feel alone in the beginning, friends will find you. And Sakura heard Naruto's reflective laugh before continuing, and if they don't come to you, you go to them. Find the person who is also alone, and in them, you'll have a lifelong friend. My best friend is often still alone, but we find our way back to one another, because we are each other's closest friend to this day. He needs to be punched occasionally, but he is a good guy. Sakura chuckled to herself at that, then revealed her snooping by acting as if she were catching Naruto in a love confession. Never thought I'd ever hear you admit that aloud. And Naruto turned to her, looking as if he had been caught with his pants down. He rubbed the back of his head. Oh, hey Sakura. Don't tell Sasuke I said that, K. When Isao finally caught her standing there, Sakura raised her hand and waved, revealing her own jovial smile. The child abandoned the party and sprinted toward her like no child ever had. He clutched her around the middle, and Sakura had to summon chakra to her feet just to keep from sprawling on the ground from the force of his hug. You're here. Isao was mumbling into her side, large tears brimming along his bottom eyelids, and Sakura realized suddenly that despite his smiling, this was the moment where he felt safest and was letting all that pent-up stress directly fuel that sniffling. Sakura hugged him tightly back, catching Naruto's giant grin as he walked toward them with his fingers laced behind his head. I'm glad to see you well, Sakura admitted to Isao truthfully, her own emotions beginning to make her throat swell. She did her best to swallow them, coughing out, how are you enjoying the leaf so far? Naruto isn't pushing you too hard, is he? He can be a bit oblivious, so telling him directly is what always works best for the rest of us. She teased her friend, who grumbled, not you too, Sakura. Iruka and Konohamaru were laughing again. Sakura waved at them, too. It's so lively here, Isao admitted. It's a lot to take in. But everyone has been so nice. I was just trying to convince Iruka to take us all out for ramen since it will be Isao's first time. Naruto confessed as he came to stand beside her. He nudged her with his elbow. But it's not working. Your treat, Sakura. Sakura wanted to habitually threaten his life like she had always done as a genin, but found herself sighing and nodding instead. She'd buy Naruto 100 bowls of miso ramen with extra pork. Just for the kindness he showed Isao in her absence alone, not to mention everything else he had ever done for her. And besides, the last thing she had eaten was a stick of slimy eel fish, so Sakura was beside herself with hunger. At Naruto's huzzah, Sakura placed a hand on top of Isao's head after he let her go and wiped his eyes. I was just coming to retrieve you for a short health check, but let's get you some food first. Together, the three of them headed for Ichiraku, and Sakura watched with a smile as Naruto explained to Isao what the best ramen order was. Eager to please, Isao did everything Naruto was telling him to do, and Sakura elbowed him sharply. Let him pick out what he wants. She grinned innocently when Naruto overdramatized his new pained ribs. But Isao only nodded his eager approval at the food when it finally arrived. When Isao began to eat enthusiastically, Naruto elbowed her back privately, saying, congrats by the way. It was about time that you too. Sakura's hand found his mouth to silence him as she looked back to her left at Isao to see if the child had heard her obnoxiously loud friend, but Isao played it off as if he hadn't, turning back to his food and slurping loudly. Perceptive child. Geez, Sakura. I wasn't going to say that, but that too, huh? Naruto whispered and grinned cheekily and Sakura dropped her jaw in absolute shock at his bluntness. Naruto, Sakura seethed, steamed to compete with the ramen once again coming fresh off the planes of her too large forehead. Alright, sheesh, Naruto sighed, raising two hands to ward off her temper. I just wanted to wish my two best friends a lifetime of happiness together. So now I'm your best friend, too. Not 20 minutes ago, you just told Isao that you had only one best friend. Being the third wheel is starting to get old, you know. She pretended to pout with her chin in her palm. Doesn't seem like you're much of a third wheel anymore, to me. And Sakura immediately asked, what did he tell you? Because Sakura was trying to fit the information together. Sakura hadn't told him, she had confirmed it for Kakashi, but Naruto had purposefully been kept in the dark. She took a calming breath because she certainly hadn't told anyone about how official things seemed to have become just in the last 24 hours. Naruto glanced over her shoulder to catch Isao strategically ordering another bowl of ramen while they talked, and Naruto stopped mid-conversation to say, make that too, old man. And then slowly, he said, I'm not as dumb as you two believe me to be. I have eyes, too, sometimes. Emphasis on the sometimes. I'm happy for you too, he nodded, leaning across her to ask Isao if he had ever had Naruto fish cakes in his ramen, to which Isao had replied that he had never had ramen, which sent Naruto into hysterics. Sakura was near hysterics herself because talking about her relationship status with Naruto was not on her to-do list and it took her by complete surprise. She didn't even know what to say. Thanks, Naruto, she ended up whispering to him, for everything you've done for Sasuke. And for me. You kept your promise, you know. You brought him back. And I always will. You have my word. Sakura shook her head. She wouldn't ever burden Naruto the same way she had as a genin. No, I'll never let you make that sort of promise again, Naruto. You have a family now. A baby on the way. I'll be there for Sasuke now. Keep him in line. That sort of thing. She grinned as she raised her fist in an illustrative threat. But, in response, Naruto reached out an arm and clapped a hand on her shoulder. We can take care of him together. Take shifts, since you're right. I do have a baby on the way. It was a celebratory statement, at such a volume that revealed that Naruto had reached his limitations on whispered speech for one evening. But I'll trade you for night shifts when the baby gets here. Sakura laughed at that intrusive picture. An exhausted, dark-eyed Naruto showing up on her doorstep with a baby in his arms and handing him to Sakura, while heading toward her room where Sasuke slept, curling up next to the Uchiha as if he were the baby that needed snuggling, except Sasuke was a prickly porcupine who would kick him straight off the bed. Maybe she could rope Kakashi into it somehow and it would be like Team 7 was raising a baby together. Well, when Hinata needed a break, of course. She wasn't the sort to hog a newborn baby that didn't belong to her, those sort of people were odd. But helping when asked, Sakura wasn't bothered by that notion. She thought back to her and Sasuke's mutual understanding about a delayed family start, if they even got that point. So, if Hinata felt up to sharing, Sakura would spend every night awake with her and Naruto's sweet child. Unlike Naruto himself, this baby would be surrounded by a family who loved him. You're having a baby. Isao suddenly chimed in as he leaned across Sakura to talk to her boisterous shinobi friend, no longer pretending not to hear their conversation. I love babies. I always wanted a brother or sister. Really? Naruto asked him, because I'm sure that Hinata and I could use all the help we can get. Isao's face brightened as he smiled at Naruto, and Sakura was suddenly seeing another copy of an adoring Konohamaru in Isao, who was essentially a copy of Naruto. Not to mention the copy yet to be born. This world was going to be full of Narutos, Sakura thought to herself, but she also found herself smiling and admitting that it wouldn't be a bad thing. Long after Naruto left them in pursuit of Sasuke, Isao glanced over at her as they walked back toward the hospital. Curiosity getting the better of him, Isao questioned, his best friend, the one he was talking about, that's the man you love. The one who was in Sunagaku with you. Sakura didn't know why exactly he was asking, but she nodded, suddenly nervous about Isao's perception of Sasuke and what her choice in him might mean to the young boy. His father had been cruel to him, his mother lost forever. She felt the weight of her choices in the contextual lens of a young person's impressionable viewpoint. But that feeling went away when Isao said, "Why'd you and Naruto break up?" He said something about you two dating in the past. Sakura dropped her chin, and her face turned red. Naruto, she growled. Don't believe anything that idiot tells you. Isao's laughter was sharp and bright and Sakura realized that for the first time, she had never heard him truly laugh before until now. As a medic, she knew it was a good sign that came with a change in environment. As someone who cared about the youth, her heart felt such peace. The August cicada song of Konoha summer evenings was a comforting sound to Sasuke. It was loud, definitely, but not near as loud as the deafening roar of life in Shikatsu Forest. It was warm and humming, and it was also a sound that Sasuke had once associated with his birthday. Being in Konoha for the first time since May, he realized his birthday must have passed under his nose without him remembering. That's how it was when one got older, but for Sasuke, he had forgotten his birthday and age altogether the moment his family, the people who celebrated those things with him, were murdered. All dates of celebration were eclipsed in his mind by anniversaries of death. It was probably the same for many shinobi who'd lost their loved ones to a world of war. After Sasuke had forgotten about his birthday, the cicada sound became attached to new memories other than his birthday. It was the sound of conversations between friends, camping by a fire in the forest, D-rank missions, and competitive sparring. Pairing it with the smell of street vendors and the Konoha evening dinner crowd made Sasuke suddenly overcome with nostalgia. Is that everything you need, dear? Came the vendor's question, and Sasuke suddenly realized he was spacing. He nodded, accepting the bag of supplies from the older woman, a face he recognized from his youth, but she didn't seem to recognize him. Speaking to anyone in Konoha was sometimes nerve-wracking because Sasuke didn't know if he was going to be receiving a fearful reception or an indifferent one. Sasuke was walking back in the direction of the Uchiha compound when that idiot blonde's voice became louder than the cicada song. Yo, do you need help with that? Unlike you, I've got 2 arms now. Sasuke closed his eyes and scoffed. Don't you have anything better to do than be doing, loser? Aren't you about to be a father? Won't your wife be angry if she catches you goofing off? Hinata doesn't get bent out of shape easily. Your wife, on the other hand. Naruto countered and pointed at Sasuke square in the face when the Uchiha snapped his neck in his direction. Naruto laughed. After a minute of solid glaring and no denying on Sasuke's part, Naruto stopped mid-step and dropped his mouth. Wait just a second. Are you serious? You two are married. Sasuke turned on his heel and continued to make his way into the tree line. Why didn't Sakura tell me that? And here she was going on about a third wheel, but you two are leaving me out of the know. Sasuke sighed again, not sure if he was relieved or frustrated that Naruto had discovered that secret. Well, maybe. He could still patch it, possibly. If Sakura wasn't saying anything, then Sasuke sure damn well wasn't confirming anything. He would let her tell it in her own time. There's nothing to tell, so shut up before the entire village hears you. So you're not. I need to know. Spill. Why do you need to know anything? It's none of your business. His joking voice changed, that quiet solidness it sometimes took on when Naruto was trying to get on Sasuke's level. It is my business when you go and threaten the Leaf and Shinobi world again. Sasuke stopped walking then, turning to Naruto once they were both under tree cover. Kakashi already gave me the lecture, so you can save your breath. He sat, unfurling his scrolls and dumping the bag's contents on the ground beside them with the purpose of restocking his summoning scrolls. Naruto leaned against an opposite tree, arms crossed and eyes upward to the treetops. I know that you don't mean those things. That you only said it because they allowed Sakura to walk into danger alone. It makes more sense, knowing the scale of what she means to you now. Sasuke wanted to correct him. He wanted to tell Naruto that before and after he was consumed in darkness, Sakura had always been important to him. The only difference was that his goal had changed and that he was on the right side, the side that allowed him to admit and develop his attachment to her. Essentially, only after Sasuke had experienced death, that zone of in-between where he could still talk to Naruto and their souls collided, did Sasuke see that whatever goals he had in life, the only way to reach them was with the help of Naruto and the multitude on his side. While being the only one cut out for his solitary role, Sasuke had still tried to keep that distance from Sakura, but because he had believed it to be for her own sake. Not because he didn't care for her on the same measure as now. Making her his wife didn't mean he had cared less before. It was just a little different now, because he had finally admitted it to himself, something he had never done before. For both of his friends, Sasuke had denied their bonds to spare himself of the pain of losing them. And there was another factor that altered the situation. If Sakura were targeted because of their marriage and killed because of the Uchiha tie, then yes, Sasuke would avenge her. He would avenge her regardless, but it would be an entire new level of vengeance. An intense and dark sort of retaliation. Which had Sasuke considering his threat. Despite what Naruto believed, Sasuke had meant every word of it, and even though it scared everyone for him to say those words, it also scared Sasuke. Because he didn't want to fall, didn't want to pitch back into darkness. He had tried to stay far away from the edge of it for the last 2 years, but falling in love with that pink-haired Kunoichi, it just might make him stagger. Because that's what love did to an Uchiha, and Sasuke was well aware of that. Had faced it very recently with a display of Amaterasu on the prick who had marred Sakura's skin with her own blood. However, this time, Sasuke had the confidence that he wouldn't fall to such depths again. Because of his closest friend across from him. Because of Naruto. Where Sakura had become a tether to sanity and happiness, Naruto was still the savior when that lifeline snapped. The person who dove after the falling and careened over the edge along with them, and just when you thought their strength would run out and they would let go or fall too, they somehow managed to pull you both back to safety. Your promise still stands? Sasuke asked aloud, glancing up at Naruto through his eyelashes. To stop me no matter what? Naruto held his eyes as he nodded. Hell yeah, always. Then there's nothing to worry about. The future remains bright. What are you two going to do now? Are you staying in the leaf? No, Sasuke admitted bluntly, resuming the task of sealing each item into his traveling scrolls. I know my mission. This doesn't change that. Naruto frowned. Then Sakura. Is she staying here? She has her own goals, and her work is essential to the leaf. She belongs here. We can think of a different plan, Sasuke. Naruto sighed, a sound that was both frustrated and sorrowful. We can do this thing together. We are doing it together, Sasuke countered. This is the only way to do that. The three of us, we each have a role to play. Think of it like stars and orbits. Naruto hummed, that blank squinting confusion passing his features. What was that now? Sasuke asked. Forget it. Should have known it would be too complicated for you to understand. Naruto started his fake nod, like he was following, even though he clearly wasn't. Something about space. Got it. I can be a part of this space thing. Because I'm out of this world. Get it? Definitely spacey. Sasuke deadpanned, smirking at his own joke that still went over Naruto's head. The cicada song in Sasuke's heart grew louder. We need to talk. Sakura turned from her work of capsulizing the newly acquired Perforatum to find Shikamaru there. She was finishing reviewing the antidepressants trial period and clinical practice schedule with Tsunade, smiling as her old mentor assisted and simultaneously tried to pry the details of her last couple months of traveling with Sasuke. Sakura had been blushing furiously from that last very personal question her mentor had boldly asked just before the door had opened. Tsunade and Sakura had turned to one another in surprise at Shikamaru's interruption, and big-eyed Sakura had answered, okay. Already nervous about the tone of voice delivering that declarative statement. What's got you worked up, Shikamaru? Tsunade crossed her arms, before leaning in Sakura's direction and whispering, probably overworked. Shizune used to get cranky, too. Or his ponytail is too tight, either one. But Shikamaru ignored the loud whispers, staring only at Sakura. We need to talk about Sasuke. Both the Sannin and her pupil got very still at that. I'll leave you to it, then, announced Tsunade immediately, ditching Sakura not because she wasn't going to be the sort of mentor to take Sakura's side, but because she was the former Hokage, and Sakura knew that Tsunade had had several uncomfortable conversations about the Uchiha with the rest of Team 7 over the years. Sakura suspected she was either staying out of it completely or she believed the conversation might be a necessary one, whatever it was about. Sakura caught the unwavering determination in the set of Shikamaru's shoulders. He wasn't going to take no for an answer, and Sakura tried her best not to immediately bristle or react in Sasuke's defense. She had a strange sense of déjà vu, recalling that time Sai and Shikamaru had come to talk to her about what needed to be done about Sasuke. The Konoha 11 had decided to take it upon themselves to eliminate Sasuke because Naruto's defense of him was causing strain with the hidden cloud. At the time, it was believed to be essential in avoiding a war with the hidden cloud. In the end, Sakura had been the one to try to shoulder it alone, and she had failed. And after all this time, here was Shikamaru, approaching her in the same manner he had done back then, and it made Sakura's stomach turn violently. What about him? She asked, crossing her arms and leaning back against the table. Shikamaru sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. Naruto didn't want us to tell you. But considering Sasuke's past, and the importance of our present peace, I feel you ought to know. With every word, Sakura's heart was sinking until it hit the floor. No, it hit the first level of the building. What happened? Whatever it is, I'm sure there's an explanation. Shikamaru sighed before looking her dead in the face. Sasuke threatened the leaf, Sakura. Again. He threatened to personally become Konoha's, no, the entire shinobi world's, enemy again. Sakura froze and her arms fell from their rigged position and her entire body went numb as those words registered. What are you talking about? Back in Sunagakure, Shikamaru explained brusquely, not pulling the punch of the truth of it. He gave it to her frankly and quickly. After you left, the Lord Hokage and the Kazekage denied him permission to follow you. Him and Naruto, both. Because that's what you had asked. And, Sakura asked breathlessly, not sure why Sasuke was being singled out if he and Naruto had both reacted how she had expected them to. But Sasuke didn't accept the Hokage's orders, Shikamaru continued, like this choice alone was Sasuke's noose. Unlike Naruto, he threatened his way out of that room. She fell silent, because she didn't know what to say to that. And Kakashi. Not just Kakashi, we all knew he meant it. Every one of us. Kakashi let him leave because of that threat. I've talked to him, Sakura rushed out, panic gripping her chest. Her words came out choppy like the floodwaters of that cave she was suddenly remembering. He promised. Well, I promised. We will take care of him. Naruto and I will stop him if he ever. Will you? The shadow wielder asked incredulously. Will you two always take the fall for him? Will you always live in fear of his derailment? You two will spend the rest of your lives trying to keep him in line. He ran out of second chances this last time, there aren't any more. He's not going to need another one, Shikamaru, Sakura rushed to reassure him. She was remembering her and Sasuke's conversation in the black abyss of a fire-lit cave just 3 nights ago. Right after she had just witnessed Sasuke try to delimb someone, she confronted him. I don't want to become a detriment to you, Sasuke. I don't want to be what breaks you, she had said. To which he had responded with, it's a part of me. No matter how hard I try to eradicate it, there's a monster in here. And we both know what he's capable of. Even now, I don't feel regret when I should. I have absolutely no desire to apologize for my actions tonight. But that look on your face is the same expression you looked at me all the times I've been lost. I don't want to see that anymore. Sakura had promised that she and Naruto would not let him become a monster again and he had told her he could choose her because of it. Sakura sucked in a breath, before adding, it won't get that far. The world needs Sasuke if there's to be a future at all. Let me ask you this then, Shikamaru questioned without delay. Do you need him more than the world does? His threats were concerning you, Sakura. Naruto told us you two were together now. And whatever. I don't really care what you two are. What I do care about is the ninja world, Konoha, and our current peace. That should be your priority as well, Sakura. If cutting Sasuke off is something that will save all of us, I am begging you on behalf of the world to do so. It was dusk by the time Sakura finished helping settle the new group of convicts she had delivered this morning and made her way toward her apartment on the outskirts of town. She didn't know where Sasuke was, but she imagined he was caught up with Naruto, the two probably knocking each other's teeth out or something somewhere. They had that annoying habit of having to challenge one another to a duel every time they reunited. And to be quite frank, Sakura needed a few minutes to herself just to think. She revealed her copy of the apartment key from a hidden jutsu she kept it under when she was away on missions. It materialized into existence on the ground before her, like a stepping stone into a sanctuary. Everything was exactly how she had left it. Clean, but bearing evidence of her quick departure. Sasuke's palette on the sofa was still there as if it had only been yesterday when Sakura had forced him to stay over. Her father's clothes that he had borrowed were folded neatly and placed on the arm. Leftover, now expired, onigiri in the fridge. Their clean dishes stacked to the left of the sink. It was incredible how the official beginning of them was right before her face, preserved by the time capsule of 4 private walls. And yet, despite their previous time of residence, the house had returned to the odor of its original making, the familiar sense of fresh tea and herbal concoctions no longer attaching itself to the walls simply because she had vacated and taken them with her. It suddenly reminded Sakura of the fleetingness of life and of the impending departure of Sasuke once more. The evidence of his presence in her life would be there, but suddenly, he wouldn't. And he would take his sense, his smirking confidence, his ridiculous stoicism with him. It hadn't even been 12 hours, and Sakura's heart already ached for him. How was she supposed to do this? How was she supposed to accept his leaving again? She couldn't even bring herself to let him leave, let alone choose to suddenly live without him. Shikamaru had asked her to choose the world. As ridiculous and weak-natured as this self-confession made her, Sasuke was her world. Shikamaru had asked her to make a selfless decision and impossible choice. Shikamaru was asking her to live without her world, so everyone still had theirs to live for. Just as the Konoha 11 had once done years ago. And Sakura would do it this time, wouldn't she? That's what she had told herself the entire walk here. For Konoha, she should. As a leaf shinobi, it was her duty to put the village first. Like a pinprick of light, her eyes found the extra copy of the key on her kitchen counter, the one she had given Sasuke the night she had asked him to come to her as a friend while he was resting in Konoha. The very key he had given back to her, saying no and that he refused the life she offered. It still sat where she had tossed it in dismay several months ago, a cold key that bore no evidence of Sasuke ever holding it. And Sakura suddenly realized that this is what her life would be like, what she had chosen. A home that bore no witness of him being there. It wouldn't smell like him, it wouldn't feel like him. It would be hers and he would be a passing star whose light became too far away to even see anymore. And all that was expected of her from everyone else was to not prevent that star from playing its crucial role in the universe. She was to move along on her own orbital path, trying not to prevent their inevitable separation. To be indifferent to their fate. But Sakura wasn't indifferent. She would never be able to be indifferent, and she didn't know why Shikamaru had tried to tell her to be, because everyone knew how selfish she and Naruto were when it came to Sasuke, didn't they? They would do exactly as Shikamaru had predicted them to. They would spend the rest of their lives clinging to his sanity for him. Sakura fretted over Sasuke hours into the night as she held on to that key. On her sofa, with tea brewing as an attempt to make her home feel like its old self, Sakura finally realized that it might never feel like home again. Not after being with him these past few months. And she stood from her sofa, the scream of the tea kettle a perfect depiction of what she was suddenly feeling like on the inside. She had to go and find him. Because every second mattered. They were separating, their orbits spinning away from one another, and she needed every minute left of it. And then a myriad of unwanted thoughts came with this most recent realization: what if he already left? Maybe he was late because he wasn't coming back. He had brought her back to the leaf and left the first chance he got before she could follow him. And just before she exited her home in pursuit of the Uchiha once again, she swung open the door to see the man in question raising his hand to knock against the frame. He was shocked for a moment as he unexpectedly came face to face with her, and she stood motionless in the absolute relief of seeing him there. He rubbed the back of his neck awkwardly. Then sighed nervously. "I'll take that key, if it's still being offered." And she almost threw it at him. But she found herself helplessly reaching out for him, wrapping her arms around his neck as she began to sob uncontrollably. He stiffened at first at the suddenness of her grasping, confused as to why she was crying to the point of hysteria. He pushed her through the entryway and kicked the door shut behind him, wrapping his arm loosely around her waist as his body thawed of his initial embarrassment. What happened? He asked slowly, a worried rumble through his chest and throat. Why are you suddenly crying? Sakura's words came out through rattled breaths, and she pushed back against the surge of panic with an explanation. I thought, inhale, thought why, you'd, inhale, exhale, inhale, left. She cried some more, before attempting to say, I thought you must have left again. He got still. I promised not to do that anymore, remember? He automatically reassured her. We both did. I said I'd find you later, so you'd have no doubt. Yeah, she found herself exhaling, slowly counting in her mind the way she had taught small children to when they were upset. The tea kettle continued to squeal, and it was deafening, but so was her own thoughts. She clung to him and wouldn't let go until he led her to the sofa. He walked over to remove the kettle, and like the metaphor to her internal frenzy, the kettle began to quiet as a direct result of his mediation. This is yours. She reached out her hand to drop the key into his single palm when he came to stand before her once more. It always has been. Even before you wanted it. She stared down as he took it from her hands, and she didn't see what he did with it, but heard the rustle of his clothing as he tucked it away somewhere. His silence felt unsure, and Sakura knew his mind was probably spiraling, afraid he would say something else to set her off. And so Sakura whispered, it's not much of a home and it's small, but when you're here, it can be yours, too. He nodded, attempting to ease her concerns about their mutual habitation needs by saying, I won't be in your way. You can live wherever you like. She began to cry again at that, and Sakura could tell by his stricken face that he suddenly realized it had been the wrong thing to say after all. It broke his hesitancy, and he reached his palm forward and ran his thumb along the ridge of her cheekbone, wiping the tears there. Don't cry. I'm saying that you will be home to me. She nodded, trying to calm herself, which his soothing gesture was helping immensely. She leaned into it, hoping he never moved it away. Sakura was comforted immensely at the thought of being Sasuke's home to return to, even if Sakura spent a lifetime waiting for her home to return to her. I'm sorry. I'm always crying. And I'm the one always making you, it seems like. He confessed with a frown. I hate that. She shook her head. No. It's just been a day. Sasuke didn't respond to that, so Sakura asked the next looming question on her mind, when are you leaving? He sucked in a breath, not quite ready to tell her, but then exhaled. Tomorrow. In the morning. Already. She wanted to cry again. Her tears rushed to her eyes the longer he refused to clarify, modify, or ask her to come with him. So that was it, then. Our time together has stopped. I'm going to continue to find the leader of the organization who is after you. I'll find him first before I continue to pursue the Otsutsuki. There's not much more time to delay. We've delivered the rest of them to Kakashi. I must continue on, now. I can help you, she tried, knowing he would deny her anyway. I can help you with the Zenshin leader and make more chakra pills for you when you run out. He was looking down between them, at the careful space kept between them on the auburn-colored sofa. After what you've recently done, you deserve to rest. You'll be safe here, and I'll have peace knowing that, while I do the mission only I can do. She wasn't ready to give this topic up. She argued anyway. Shikamaru's voice was like a ticking clock in the back of her mind as she approached the discussion she needed to have with him yet again. What if they come for me here? While you're away, Mozai could come. It would be his next logical step. He wouldn't come here and risk having to deal with Kakashi and Nar. She pushed on. What if they find and kill me? What are you going to do if that happens, Sasuke? He got very still as those words registered, not because he was angry at the idea of it or fearful of it becoming true. He froze with a staring sourness of narrowed eyes, because he had caught on to the direction of her conversation. She suddenly knew that Sasuke had just learned that she was told about his choice words of a threat back in Sunagaku. She steeled herself at that stare, swallowing back the discomfort of the confrontation. Are you going to avenge me? Are you going to become an enemy of the world again if someone else is taken from you? Sasuke stood from the couch at her words, turning his back on her in the darkness of the room. I'm getting really tired of this conversation, he retorted scornfully. I have already had it twice today. So it's true, she laughed mirthlessly, standing up along with him as she stared at his bowed head and bent shoulders. You really said that? Why? You never would have said something like that as far as I was concerned in the past. You've risked everything you have worked toward over the last 2 years by doing that. He had started to walk away from her as she spoke, every word stiffening his posture. His only response was, "Who told you what I said? Was it Naruto? Kakashi?" Sakura ignored his redirection, because she had to say this. She had to do this so when the time came for her to be accountable for her own actions in the world, Sakura could use this conversation as an excuse for why she couldn't do more than this. She continued, "Why did you say that? Why go to that extent? Because I went on a mission of my own volition. In the past, I was always the annoying person who was in your way, and now you've made me a liability to the world. You're being annoying right now," he droned, using that tone of voice that always made her body fill with ice. Instead of the playful connotation of that word, it now reminded her of all the times he had chastised her and been cruel on purpose. It still hurt when he used it that way. He sighed and turned to face her then at her silence, and Sakura could see the small regret of those words. So he clarified, "You're my wife. I'm allowed to say that I will avenge you, and I'll make sure the world knows that I will. We had made no vows when you said that. We weren't serious yet." He was getting angrier every time she tried to speak. It caused him to spill secrets he had kept for a long time, words that would heal Sakura's pain from the past and sustain her like fodder throughout her future of loneliness. "I knew where it was headed. I've known for a long time. Since before I left the Leaf, I knew what you would become to me. It's why I said and did those things to you. To keep you away from me. You were supposed to hate me so this would never happen. I would have avenged you when we were Genin together on Team 7, maybe even after at some points. And I would do so now. As I would for Naruto, or Kakashi even." After a moment, more tears streamed down her face, because Sasuke didn't know the gravity of what he just confessed. She still hadn't gotten to the hard part, because Sakura had been asked to do everything she could to protect the world, but she just couldn't give Sasuke up. Her and Naruto both, he would be their weakness for life. So, she had to do the next extreme, and very gutsy thing she could think of. "I need you to add it to your vow to me. Right now. That you never will. If I am killed tomorrow, or Naruto, or Kakashi, you'll never choose revenge again. You told me that night that the world will not pay for us loving one another." Sasuke laughed, scornfully. Like she had just said something funny, and Sakura had never seen him laugh except for when he was wrapped in darkness. He laughed again in utter exhaustion, rubbing his palm down across his face. Maybe it was the trauma of the past coming back to haunt her, but it made her blood run cold at the familiarity. In a flash of panicked anger, Sakura pulled out her kunai and angled it toward her heart. There was a sound of metal, and Sasuke's laughter died immediately at the sight of it, and a still rage filled his eyes as they widened at her actions. She wasn't swayed by that wrath, and when he instantly made an interfering step toward her, she drew it closer to her chest, stilling him straightaway. "Now you're the one making stupid threats, Sakura." He sneered lowly and she could see the flash of his red Sharingan. She was going to run out of time to make this stupid bluff of a facade count. It was an extreme thing to do maybe, but she couldn't think of another way to get him to see what he had done by putting her in a position of choosing him or choosing Konoha. "Shikamaru said I needed to cut ties with you," she explained. "That being with you was a risk. But I can't do that because I am selfish. What I should do is end myself now for the sake of the village, because my life is not worth the risk you pose to the world." That's what you will be asking me to do if you continue using my life as the rationale for your recent behavior. If you keep making threats like this, then it will be the only thing I can do to save it. That bastard didn't tell you everything I said, he hissed, furiously, a quiet sound that still jarred her nerves just as much as the screeching tea kettle had. I also said that I wouldn't survive it. I said the world would just as likely fall to the Otsutsuki in my absence. And that's the truth. You dying will make a shell out of me, if not outright kill me, too. Her hand lowered at those words, and the Uchiha saw it with his Sharingan, and the next thing Sakura knew, she was no longer holding that kunai as it was transported places with the handle of that still hot tea kettle. The metal singed her skin as it swung in the air and she winced before dropping it. Sasuke rushed forward and caught the handle himself before it could hit the ground, and he glared at her as he placed it on the table before the sofa. Cheap trick, she chided, as he came very close to standing before her. He held her eyes with red and purple irises. She didn't look away. Don't you ever do that again, even to make a point. If you don't want to be with me because you choose the world, fine. None of your choices change what we are to one another. Every word was sharp and stony. It's a hard lesson to learn, believe me, but you would have to erase our past. I tried that, and you fought to make me remember. All of you did. So now you have to live with that choice. Tell me what to do, Sakura pleaded. Tell me how I can love you and still protect the world from you. You just have to live. Because of you, I will continue. I will find the Otsutsuki race and eliminate them as a threat so that I can return to you, just like I promised. And if someone ever dared to touch you, they would die for it, and Naruto would prevent it from going beyond that. And if Naruto dies, it will be you who I have to cling to. You all just have to accept that. I can't stop you, Sasuke. And I can't kill you. I'll never be able to kill you. Even after you tried to kill me, yourself, I couldn't follow through. I'll never be able to stop you from another path of destruction because, like I said, I'm selfish. Despite what Shikamaru said, I can't choose the world over you. My choice will always be you. Just as it was the day you left me the first time. I'd even go as far as to help you with revenge. As always, I'm pitiful. I'm hopeless. I'm in love with you. I love you more than the world. What kind of ninja does that make me? It makes me a traitor. His irritation faded as she confessed this long stream of thoughts to him. He reached forward and cupped the back of her neck, pulling her the rest of the way to him. No, it makes you an Uchiha. More tears fell down her cheeks as he pulled her mouth the rest of the way to his. And he was pushing her toward the couch. Down onto the surface of it as he claimed her mouth with his. And it was a frantic exploration with his tongue, a touch that was high with the intoxication of tormenting truths, threats, and confessions. A type of kissing that came after you thought you might never get to do so again. In a way, he made it bruising and punishing, for having even dared to do what she had. He pressed her body deep into the couch as he straddled her waist and Sakura reached up and desperately clung to the collar of his shirt. He leaned over her, fist tangled in her hair as he pulled her head flush against the headrest of the sofa to reveal her throat. Sakura's skin prickled at the roughness. I told you there would be no going back for us, he breathed against her jawline, sending gooseflesh into the scalp of her head and along her arms. It's too late, remember. We get to choose each other, and I'll even vow to you that the world will not pay for this. I have already chosen the world for all of us. You get to choose me and not live with the guilt of it. I won't become who I used to be. Because I don't want to see you look at me like that. She nodded before his mouth found hers again. It was hot, sweltering, fueled with the fire nature of his chakra. He meant to burn her up, completely. So that when he had to leave tomorrow morning, she could still feel the heat of him. She would allow herself to be burned from his heat because then at least something would remain of him. He pushed her clothing down around her, pulling the shirt up and over her head between kisses, demanding the attention of her mouth. In the next instant, He was pulling something from his cloak. A red bundle the size of his fist. Still straddling her lap, he unfurled it in front of her face. An Uchiha crest, front and center on the back side of a perfect rendition of the shirt she had just been wearing, hung before her like a territorial flag. She outright gasped. For a second, you had me thinking you were done with me, and I wasn't going to get to give this to you, he sighed between labored panting, his heart still beating loudly from their heated proximity. I had it made today. You'll wear it in my stead, won't you? Sakura's face hurt at this point from crying so much, and she was sure it was splotchy and red, but it didn't stop her from crying more. She nodded through tears and Sasuke showed her his rare, sporadic smile. She slipped it over her head and he stood, pulling her with him and spinning her so he could see it on her. She blushed at the scrutiny, looking down and tucking her hair behind her ear. Her shyness melted away when he abandoned his own, tilting her chin up to claim her mouth once more. You're now the only Uchiha woman in this world, he whispered against her mouth. I've never seen someone look as beautiful as you do right now. Wearing that. Okay. Maybe her bashfulness hadn't completely vanished, because she was blushing furiously after he said that. And with it, she experienced a sudden moment of disassociation. Could this even be real? Just moments ago, she was dramatically threatening her own life, and now she didn't care about anything else other than simply just living for him. To have more of him. Every second, even in madness, she would take it all. Because she was selfish. Because she didn't care about anything else and never had. But his hot mouth on hers grounded her. He was real and she could have him. And she could look Shikamaru confidently in his face from now on, regardless of her choice, because he, too, was a star locked in his own orbit of destiny, but Sasuke was the sun of her life and meant to burn her. And he did. The steam of herbal tea intensified that heat, searing the press of him, the feel of him, his mouth on hers into the memory of home, and it lingered long into the blissful after. And at some point during their kissing, Sasuke reached above her head to crack open the window behind her, letting in the nighttime fading sound of hot summer cicadas and crickets. I want to hear them. I want to remember this when I hear them. She felt for him, pulling his shirt away from his muscular back, and he felt feverish, but they both knew he wasn't sick. Just intoxicated with adrenaline and need. Sasuke continued to push her down into the very couch where she had been sitting in despair moments ago, and when he became parallel with her own body, reaching into her waistband, she hooked her leg up and over his hip so he could reach exactly where he was aiming. Before things escalated further and they lost themselves to the mindlessness of burning a second time, Sakura pulled back and reached into her pocket, revealing a tiny vial of citrine-tinted liquid sloshing from the movements of its revelation. Take this. So that there's no uncertainty, Sakura explained. Tsunade helped me make it today. It's common here for men to take a contraceptive, as well. We'll both be covered. His euphoric expression of concentration turned into a frown as he met her eyes in understanding. He looked at it and then looked at her. Sasuke held that concoction with pure hatred. Shikamaru and Naruto, both, could take a damn hike and take their holier-than-thou lectures elsewhere. Because they got to stay in the leaf and fuck their women, plant themselves with abandon in order to take root in the woman of their dreams and watch their children grow inside of them. Sasuke didn't get to do that. He got a few moments of blissful ecstasy with years to divide them, and watch their families grow like mocking gardens of happiness while he dragged Sakura into the deep dark earth of a barren family tree. She would be the only branch of his dying lineage unless he could complete his goal, first. Which is why he had to leave tomorrow, so he could come back to her free of conflicting obligations. Their eyes held one another's as he pulled the stopper. I'm sorry, he whispered, swallowing that putrid mixture of protection that was simultaneously a death sentence of a future disguised as responsibility. It was a choice he had to make for the both of them, and it killed him to do it. But he told himself that Sakura was enough for now. Stars and orbits. Stars and orbits. Stars and orbits. Sasuke didn't have time to evaluate the effects of such a potion, to see if it dulled his need, because his wife was now rising from the sofa and sinking onto the floor. And those knees hit the ground and he realized what she was planning to do as she tried to rotate his body in the direction of her face. Oh hell no. Not like that. Get up, he instructed. I want to, she confessed, thinking he was stumbling over his own nervousness as she had done back in the cave. He most certainly was not. No, he said in finality, pulling at her. Get off your knees. Uchiha women don't get on their knees for anyone. Not even their husbands. Her eyes widened at that statement, and she allowed him to pull her from the floor. How would you even know that? And Sasuke specifically remembered his father snatching his mother's cleaning rag from her as she stooped on the ground to clean the dirt that had been tracked in. Get up, he had told her as he took the chore over himself. You have 2 sons who are more than capable of doing that. I better never see you on your knees again. When it had happened, Sasuke had been shocked by the angry reproach from his father, but his mother had only laughed and walked out of the room brightly. Sasuke hadn't understood such context at the time, well, other than the fact that whatever had just happened meant he would soon be having to scrub floors. But he understood now, in this moment, what his father had been doing. And even if the situation had some sort of different context he wouldn't ever have answers to, he suddenly knew that it was going to be a rule in his relationship from now on. Because he would set the precedent. He was the only one left to make those rules. He didn't explain it to her at that moment, because time did not allow for it. Instead, he copied his father's tone to the best of his ability. Just stay off your knees. He was really leaving tomorrow. He was going to be walking away from this again. That's what Sasuke was thinking as he captured her mouth. Sasuke was selfish, and despite what he had told her moments ago, he wanted to ask her to come with him on his mission. He held his tongue, because then she wouldn't be safe in Konoha anymore. She would be sacrificing her own dream and her own work here. But as their bodies found home in one another, Sasuke lost his will to hold back that request. He had changed his mind. She could come. He would let her come with him. Stay beside him for the whole of it if she didn't care to sacrifice her own important work here in the Leaf. He could take her up on her promise from all those years ago, because he couldn't stay, but maybe, just maybe he could take her with him. Sakura let out a surprised yelp when their bodies dematerialized and reappeared on her there. Bed. A new array of scents greeted him with the change, and this room felt sacred. Because it was where she had slept every night for the last several years without him. The bedding emitted the very essence of her sweet fragrance, as if it were the concentration of all things here. This bed had just become the ribcage of his new home, where the beating heart of it would sleep waiting for his return. When he had replaced the 2 of them on the couch with the pillows of her bed, Sasuke had flipped her onto her stomach. He wanted to see the Uchiha crest. He wanted to truly be with her as she wore that symbol of his. They came back together, and Sasuke voiced what he had once wanted to say to her back then and what he wanted to say now. Come with me. In the heat of things, she didn't catch the true meaning of his words, interpreting it for its double entendre. No, he clarified, when they lay next to one another and panted shallowly. Come with me. I am asking you to come with me. What? She asked, her head shooting up and she raised onto her elbows to look at him. You're asking me to come on your mission with you. Were those more tears? He hated seeing her cry. Yes. Come with me, Sakura. It wasn't time for their orbits to separate yet. Maybe they could hold on just a little longer. It was hours before dawn, the darkness still a shield that protected them from tomorrow, when Sasuke felt Sakura shift under his encircling arm. He inwardly groaned as she made to move away from him, because it meant that she was cutting this short, choosing to break into the soft sleepy realm of togetherness that the dark sky promised them. It had been a night unlike any other, a night of peace and safety as they slept in their bed, in their home, in their village. Sakura's decision to try to sneak away was as abrasive as the sunrise would have been at that moment. Sasuke tightened his hold, pulling her back into his chest where he curled his body around her as if he could protect the peace of now just by holding her to him. He gave a grunt of protest as she froze. Sasuke was usually the one who was up all hours of the night, hardly sleeping at times while he traveled across foreign territories. Typically haunted by nightmares in the past when his eyes closed, Sasuke was usually the one beyond eager to greet the next day, the sunrise the only interruption able to halt the endless torment of his mind. It wasn't until this very moment as Sakura woke first beside him, that Sasuke realized he hadn't been plagued by dreams of any kind for the last month at least, and he didn't need to wonder as to why. The why slept beside him, trying to pull away from him and begin the day at an ungodly hour. Are you always going to have this annoying habit? He whispered into her shoulder, not even allowing the strength of a solid voice to interrupt this stillness. What habit? She answered back, just as quietly, but the mirthful faux exasperation still made its way through with her sharp exhalation of breath. The one where you sneak away when you think I'm asleep, Sasuke chided. This makes at least 4 times now, I believe. I have to go and see, she began, but Sasuke just pulled her in tighter, shaking his head against her shoulder. No, he simply wouldn't let her go just yet. Whatever it is, it can wait until morning. Just stay with me. And his own words fully woke him like an ironic nightmare. So please, just stay with me, Sasuke. And if you can't, then take me with you. He dug his nose deeper into her shoulder blades, shaking free from those lingering words that had never stopped ricocheting through the echoing chambers of his heart. But he was here now. They were together. And she had agreed to come with him. Sasuke Uchiha was determined to rewrite the story of them from the moment he had made his vows in an underground cave. I can't stay in this bed for much longer if you want to depart the village by sunrise, she informed him, and Sasuke wanted to say it didn't matter, but that would be a lie, and she knew the Uchiha well enough to infer that he wanted to leave in the quiet as he always chose to do. I have to talk to Kakashi, she sighed, and then added more softly, as if the truth of it was fragile, before I leave with you. Sasuke stared into her back as she said it, and his heart climbed while his stomach sank with his guilt. Despite his initial resolve to make Sakura stay behind for the sake of her goals, her safety, and the village, Sasuke had asked her to come with him. Come with me, Sakura, he had requested, a moment of weakness truly, the voice of the starved, desert man, and she had stared at him for a long minute after, as if waiting for him to take the words away again. Sasuke hated that it was in his nature to overthink everything, fail expectations, and create this pattern in Sakura of expecting the floor to be ripped out from beneath her. He hated it, but it didn't change the fact that she was right to believe it. What? She had voiced, expressing that uncertainty. You're asking me to come on your mission with you? Yes, he had doubled down, convincing both of them of what his heart had decided. Come with me, Sakura. Why the change in heart? She had asked. You said. I know. I'm selfish, too, Sakura. I shouldn't be asking you this. It's dangerous. But I just don't want it to be over yet. I need to find Kagaya, and I want you safe, and I shouldn't. God, he had been a bumbling idiot. Had he ever rambled incoherently in front of anyone before? All of that usually took place in his mind, but this time, he struggled audibly, trying to make her understand with words that never came naturally to the Uchiha. He was only ever eloquent when he was being snarky or vindictive. Stop talking yourself out of it, she smiled, shuffling closer toward him on the bed and pulling that green cotton comforter that smelled like her up and over their bare skin. I'll come with you. I wish you would say no. I'm having a hard time doing what's best for the both of us right now. I've only ever dreamed of hearing you ask me that, she had said in response. Of course I am not saying no. But afterward, His thoughts had predictably raced throughout the night as Sasuke overanalyzed his request, the decision to bring his new wife with him, and what that would mean for her in the village. What it would mean for his mission. Was he really allowed such selfishness? What would Itachi think if he knew that Sasuke had committed himself to a similar life of sacrifice, but that his younger brother had faltered? Sasuke had put it on pause, hadn't he? The moment he had chosen to meet her lips with his own back in Suna. Am I allowed this? Sasuke voiced the words he had harbored to himself in the quiet after of sex and Sakura's sleep-induced cadence of breathing. Maybe I cannot be like Itachi, after all. Maybe I'm still too weak to live a life of sacrifice. The back of her head rested back against his shoulder, until their faces became parallel silhouettes. Your choices now are not going to interrupt your mission, Sasuke, she whispered, hitting straight to the concerns in his heart. I'm going to help you, not become a hindrance to you like Shikamaru believes. The four of us, Team 7, we are going to protect this peace together. We all have roles to play. And that's why it was selfish of him, Sasuke wanted to say, but, again, couldn't find the words to explain it. Because he had juxtaposed her mission with being with him, while Sasuke planned to do both, execute his mission while she followed him. Sakura was so much more than his wife, especially to the leaf, but Sasuke just wanted his wife to be with him a little longer. The problem was that it would be to her own sacrifice. Sasuke would be foregoing nothing, which felt counterintuitive to his entire goal. He knew no matter what he said, Sakura wouldn't see it as Sasuke did. And I am taking you away from your role, he tried to explain, but she shook her head. I choose my own role. Sensing the unspoken monologue of his mind, she turned under his clinging arm to face him. You're allowed to be selfish for once, she began, but Sasuke's sigh of despondency cut her short. I've allowed myself a lifetime of selfishness in a short few years, remember? I only thought of myself and my own goals and caused a lot of pain in the process. Being selfless is a part of my journey of atonement. You were never supposed to be a part of that. And Sakura interrupted him this time, stopping his self-critical speech before he could spiral further. Her left palm reached up to the plane of his cheek, staring at him through the dark. Your future is going to be nothing but sacrifice, remember? Mine too. Now, I'm going to be selfish this time, too, because we have nothing but a future of sacrifice ahead of us. The universe will be paid its due of sacrifice in full, I promise you. He tried to say more, something about how his past was not hers to atone for, how he wished he could spare her from this life altogether, but she kissed him before he could give voice to any more of his concerns. Concerns even about her safety despite everything she had proven to him recently. Like a persistent gnat, that dread that he would be the reason Sakura was pulled back into danger again now that she was safely in Konoha, it would always be there. But Sasuke was going to eradicate the threat that remained and ease his anxieties a bit by doing so. You can't take it back, she whispered. I'll continue my work wherever it takes me and I'll help you with your goals. Just as before. We deserve this. She slipped from under his braced arm then, her inhuman strength always catching Sasuke by surprise no matter how many times she had reminded him of her abilities. He tried to blame it on her taking advantage of his lack of an appendage. Sasuke heard the shower as she retreated into the bathroom down the hall, and he face planted back onto the pillow in exhaustion. That is until he heard her tentatively call out, "Want to join me?" Sasuke shot straight up, all fatigue suddenly gone, and that gentle undisturbed night gave way to the immediate, panicky present. He blushed furiously at that question, staring wide-eyed down the hall. Did she just invite him into the shower with her? Sasuke chided himself for his reaction immediately. He had just done unspeakable things with that woman not 5 hours ago, but here he was acting like a shy first-year genin at the suggestion that he shower with her. He didn't answer, reminding himself that she likely wore a blushing face to match his, even if she was the one brave enough to ask him. Sasuke Uchiha would be damned if he skipped the opportunity. He was still a man, even if his desires for her were kept strictly in the privacy between them. But beyond that, he was more tempted to accept her offer because there was something remarkably intimate about being with someone in such an exposed way that it went beyond comfortability. Sasuke didn't want to miss out on the normalcy that developed between two people living their mundane lives beside one another, where acts such as showering together were almost as normal as showering alone. He wanted to participate in the mutual lifestyle, even if it wasn't the sort of routine Sasuke would get to hold on to in the future. The fact that he was even getting the chance to be with someone in such a way, reminded Sasuke of how far he had come and the small miracles he was going to be getting despite that vow of complete selflessness he had made to himself. Climbing into the shower, Sasuke guessed right. Sakura's face was the same rosy shade as her hair, which was just as lovely, all lathered and molded into a crown atop her head. He even noticed how the blush spread down to the back of her neck and kissed the tops of her shoulders. They both locked eyes and immediately dropped their gazes to their feet, pointedly ignoring each other's nakedness as if they hadn't just been intimate hours earlier. Their eyes locked again as they looked back up, and Sakura smiled at him reassuringly before she traded positions with him under the showerhead. She was pretending to be unaffected, continuing to massage her scalp and newly short hair, the soap bubbles running in rivulets along the paths of the loose hair along her nape drawing Sasuke's attention, and he desperately wanted to run his fingers through it. And to Sasuke's surprise, Sakura must have been thinking similarly, because she reached up to his own wet black locks immediately and did just that. He closed his eyes as she stood on her tiptoes and began massaging soap into his scalp with two hands. Gods, that felt fucking amazing. Showers were such a great invention, he announced, to which Sakura agreed, going into detail about how the homes were built with modern plumbing after Paine's demolition of the Leaf, among other modifications and technological advancements. The hot water was blissful, a luxury Sasuke did not often receive on the road, unless he was lucky enough to stumble upon a hot spring. Even a daily bath was often a rarity, and so Sasuke was determined to enjoy every second of it. He would enjoy it a lot more though, if she would let him bathe her in return. Boldly, but growing in the increasing confidence and comfortability he was finding with her these days, Sasuke turned Sakura so that she faced the stream of the shower head. He moved his hand to her hair, mimicking her washing efforts single-handedly, fingering those pink, bubble-woven strands. "Do you like girls with short hair or long hair?" she suddenly inquired, and Sasuke halted for a moment at the question. Why did she suddenly want to know that? It immediately felt like the sort of question with no right answer, and his internal alarms were going off. Irrelevant, considering you're the only girl I have, or will ever like. Surely that was the right answer. It was the truth of it, anyway. Sasuke hoped it would be enough of a response to satisfy her, but Sakura pushed on as his single-handed massaging continued. This is going to sound silly, but all of us girls at the academy grew our hair out on purpose because we had all heard the rumor that you liked girls with long hair. Sasuke raised a curious brow, trying desperately, but failing to recall any sort of youthful declaration of preference. If Sasuke were to guess, he had probably said all kinds of things to ward off silly girl advances. If someone with a schoolgirl crush on him wore glasses, he would have told her he hated girls with glasses. If another girl was short, he would have said he liked taller girls. And so on and so forth. Anything to spurn them and send them on their way. Sasuke had never had a preference for such things. A preference would be admitting he liked anyone for anything at all. And to be honest, Sasuke hadn't even paid attention to a girl's hair until one specific day in the Forest of Death. "I like your hair," he admitted candidly. "Especially when you go and cut it off like it's some declaration of war." He could tell she was smiling simply from the way she ducked her head slightly. "I guess in a way, it is," she admitted. Sasuke pulled his fingers away from her hair, curling them in hesitation, before deciding to trace a path in the soap at her shoulder blades, once again creating that symbol on her back. It had begun as a sort of declarative mark, a way to tell the world who she was to him. Then that mark had become his hope for the future of their clan. But more recently, tracing that symbol into her back was like a therapeutic reminder to them both of the choice he had made. When he did so now, Sakura laughed, but Sasuke was telling himself in his head, "It's real. This is real. This is happening. I can have this. I want this. She wants this. We will make it work one way or another and no one is going to take it from me." Fuck complete selflessness. Just like this shared experience of showering with another person, the Uchiha symbol on Sakura's back was proof of how far he had come from the man of 3 years ago, the one who would have killed her and Naruto for simply existing and being liabilities to him. So it was just a rumor then, Sakura stated, refusing to drop her chosen subject even though Sasuke was now miles away from it in his head. It felt like whiplash, coming back to it. All that time believing such a silly thing would make you like me, when it was power you only ever truly respected. Something in Sasuke's stomach soured at those words and he called upon his years of practiced indifference to refrain himself from flinching. There was truth to her statement, they both knew, and Sasuke hated that he had been that type of person. Looking back on how Sasuke had treated those with power versus how he had acted towards others he believed to be weaker than himself. Had he not sought out Team Taka based on their abilities alone? Suddenly, the Uchiha sort of wished he had been the type of person to have a preference for one's hair instead of one's power and ninja ability. Sasuke wanted to remedy his actions to her, explain it away, but like always, was going to fail miserably, he knew. He settled with trying to emphasize who he was now. "I don't see people that way anymore. I think you're the most powerful kunoichi in the world, but I loved you before any of that." Sasuke wasn't going to voice that. It definitely eased his concerns knowing she was a Sannin-level kunoichi who had proved to him countlessly now that she didn't need others to protect herself. It wouldn't be beneficial to bring that up again right now. She turned back to face him then, once again moving to switch spots with him under the running water. Even though their conversation had taken a downward turn, Sasuke couldn't help himself from trailing her body with his eyes as they pivoted, and her lower back brushed against his legs. It surprised himself how much of an affected man he actually was, even though he would convince the world he was impervious to such things. Just as Sasuke had admitted to both of them last night, he would be alone in the near future and was eager to store as many visuals of her naked as he could before they parted. He wouldn't ask her for anything more substantial now, though. Sakura was coming with him, and he could go back to allowing things to naturally transpire between them, instead of rushing into them like that starved desert man in his mind that Sasuke was having a hard time fighting against and reasoning with. He turned his own back to her when the evidence of his affectedness traveled south, and he disguised the concealing of it with the act of letting the water stream down into his face and over his chest. It was his ninja instinct that told him her eyes appraised him similarly while his back was turned. It was obvious she didn't notice his own elation, because she immediately asked with a bashful smile and redirected gaze, "So you've admitted twice now that you cared for me when we were genin. When exactly did that start?" "Oh, shit." Sasuke supposed he had alluded to that twice now, more like confessed it outright. He had angrily disclosed to Sakura in the heat of last night that his growing feelings for her was the reason for his inexcusable behavior towards her. Sasuke had told Sakura that he knew who she would become to him, which is why he had done everything to make her hate him and permanently cut his bond with her in every way possible. He chastised himself silently for admitting that. The truth to her question was that Sasuke couldn't pinpoint when he had begun to care for her in more ways than a friend. Not exactly, anyway. At first, Sakura annoyed him. Like all the others. Naruto, of course, at the top of his list, but she wasn't far behind, claiming she was in love with him when she didn't even know him. He would say he had begun to care about her around the same time he had begun to care for the rest of Team 7. But when did he know that he would come to care for Sakura in a way that was more? The Chunin exams. When he had woken from the effects of the curse mark to find her beaten and at the mercy of 3 sound ninja, and realized he would mangle and kill them for it. Or was it before then? Maybe as far back as the Land of Waves, when she thought he was dying and clung desperately to him as if doing so would keep him tethered to this world. Sasuke didn't know exactly when it had begun for him, and so he avoided her eyes, scrambling to escape answering that question, afraid to not have the answer she hoped for. He reached back to turn off the tap before reaching for the towels beyond the curtain. His wife's persistent silence told Sasuke she'd wait for the answer out. He stalled, then decided on an answer that sounded more like his usual self. Does it really matter? She immediately frowned, and Sasuke smirked as he began to towel his hair. It was getting too long and was longer than Sakura's now when wet. Damn, he wished he had 2 hands so he could dry off faster and leave the washroom that much quicker. But Sakura was as relentless as usual, deciding to take a guess at it herself. In the Forest of Death. During the Chunin exams, she gasped, as if suddenly realizing something, and covered her face with her hands. When I tried to kiss you on the bench. No, that can't be right. You were so angry that day, calling me annoying for the first time. Sasuke halted his efforts of toweling his head. What are you talking about? You're still going to pretend that you don't remember that day? You tried this the night you left, too. Sakura reproached his forgetfulness. I'll never forget when you called me annoying because I was being harsh about Naruto's upbringing. I thought you were angry because I had tried to kiss you, but I also sort of said some stupid things, she confessed in a stutter, avoiding his confused stare. No, he clarified. I remember that part. And calling you annoying. I lied that night and said I didn't remember that day, but I do. But that's not the part I'm talking about. She narrowed her eyes at his blatant provocation. I don't ever remember you trying to kiss me, he deadpanned. Seriously. You asked me what I thought about Naruto, and I gave an obnoxiously embarrassing speech about how I only wanted your acceptance. She ducked her head in defeat, grabbing her own towels and wrapping them delicately around herself. I learned my lesson after that day, and I never said anything like that again. Or tried to kiss you. Sasuke listened while roaming, blinking eyes as he tried to make sense of what she was saying. I don't remember any of that. I do remember being very angry that day because Naruto had. Sasuke stopped talking abruptly as the pieces suddenly put themselves together. That day had been like any other normal day, until Naruto ambushed him in his room with his shadow clones. They tied him up and Sasuke was forced to watch as Naruto transformed into him, a perfect Sasuke Uchiha double. That damn idiot. What? She asked, already in the process of adorning her morning work clothes despite the pre-dawn hour. That wasn't me, Sasuke smirked to himself. That was Naruto. Sakura straightened in disbelief. Wait, what? That idiot had transformed into me. Caught me by surprise and tied me up that day. I watched him transform into me and run off. And after all this time, now I know what he did as he pretended to be me. Sasuke wanted to laugh as if he were a genuinely amused by the shenanigans of Team 7 once more. Naruto had pretended to be Sasuke that day because he had wanted to get closer to Sakura, who had almost kissed him because she had been so infatuated with her schoolgirl crush. The idea of it had the Uchiha suddenly grinning wildly. Like a treasure in a time capsule, the revelation came to him like a precious piece of the past. Like the cicada song of Konoha, it made Sasuke feel warm instead of exasperated at Naruto's trickery that day. In contrast, Sakura shrieked as the realization of what Naruto had done dawned upon her, too. He did WHAAAAAT. That idiot. Sasuke grinned mischievously, not passing up the perfect opportunity to tease her. You almost kissed Naruto. Her mouth fell open. She stuttered before emphatically tossing down her towel on the floor and promising, I'm seriously going to kill him for that. When Sasuke laughed again, Sakura pointed at him with her own devious smirk. Well, one of us really did kiss Naruto, and it wasn't me, unless mouth-to-mouth counts. Sasuke threw his own towel at her face, his laughter dying immediately as hers picked back up again. Don't ever bring that up again. And mouth-to-mouth counts. She laughed, peeking under the towel over her head. Then I guess both of our first kisses were with Naruto. Can you believe that? And I've technically kissed several people before you then, as well. Sasuke frowned at the thought of Sakura performing that medically necessary practice and changed his answer. Okay. It doesn't count. Then I win. What was there to win? He asked incredulously. Nothing. But there was something to lose. Your dignity. You lose because you kissed Naruto. His wife, the Hyuga girl, begs to differ. You're right. Kissing the world's savior is not a bad way to live your life. I guess that makes you a lucky man, then. Sasuke scowled pointedly and Sakura giggled, moving toward him in the dim steamy bathroom, fully clothed now while he was still dripping naked. She splayed her fingertips across his abdomen, and he immediately wiped his face clean of emotion. She took the towel in her other hand and wrapped it around his waist to bring him closer to her. Not as lucky I feel getting to kiss you, the savior in the shadows. I guess that's true, he murmured with a smug tilt of his chin. She went in for the kiss and Sasuke reached up to secure her neck, guiding her the rest of the way. Their lips touched briefly, a promise for that natural substantiality, after all. That starvation for connection flared to life inside him like that black, pulsating eternal sun of Amaterasu he had become for her. And then a knock sounded through Sakura's home. They both immediately stilled as Sasuke's vision morphed into red and purple. Another knock. His gaze flashed in the direction of the doorway down the hall from them, and he quickly identified the two people, their two outlines of chakra concentrations flickering like flames just outside Sakura's front door. At first, Sasuke was assuming it might be someone from the hospital again, coming to request her presence. One mass was impressive and flickering erratically, a figure dangling on the other as if supported. Sasuke sighed and deactivated his visual prowess, an unnecessary drain on his chakra now that he had a guess at who was at the door. Before Sasuke could relay this conjecture to Sakura, the two individuals knocked again and announced their identities themselves. Sakura, are you there? Sorry to bother you at this hour, but Lee got a bit carried away drinking again. I heard you were back in the village, are you in there? How often does this sort of thing happen? Sasuke asked, instantly annoyed for several different reasons. 1. Sakura's offered kiss had just been interrupted and he had been quite looking forward to that. 2. Who in their right mind, because of drunkenness, would casually interrupt her sleep at this hour anyway. And 3. For some reason he would never confess aloud, Sasuke didn't quite care that Rock Lee was one of the people on the other side of the door. Not often, Sakura relayed, making her step around him. Sasuke scowled. But when Lee gets like this, I tell him to come to me without guilt or reservation. Sasuke couldn't help but scoff distinctly at that. I owe him this much, remember? She declared, making for the couch to grab her father's old set of clothes from the spot on the arm where Sasuke had left them the last time he had stayed over. She tossed it to him as he continued to pointedly display his annoyed expression. He fought for me in the forest of death and has helped me more since. Even without that between us, he is still a Konoha citizen and my patient. Sasuke almost asked, how exactly has he helped since, simply because he wanted to know the specifics, but clamped his mouth shut. Do not be an irrational dick, he told himself. He technically owed Lee too, in a sense, for helping her. Sasuke shut the bathroom door as he heard Sakura receive them, Lee greeting her enthusiastically despite his supposed drunkenness, while Sasuke stood close enough to the bathroom door to eavesdrop while he dressed. Sakura, Lee stuttered, and Sasuke could hear him stumble his way into the small space, knocking his knee ungracefully into the doorframe. Lee, sighed an exasperated feminine voice that Sasuke recognized, placing it as the female member of Team Guy whom Sasuke couldn't even recall having ever had a conversation with before. Get off her. Sorry Sakura. He always gets like this when he's had too much to drink, but you know that. It's fine. Sakura assured them. Here Lee, let's get you to the couch. It most certainly was not fine, and Sasuke finished dressing, quite done eavesdropping. He had thought he might sit it out in the bathroom, but not after that exchange. Opening the door, Sasuke casually strode into the kitchen as if he couldn't be bothered by any of them. He heard the room fall silent as he pointedly ignored them, heading straight to the kitchen in search of that cabinet where he had once retrieved some medication for Sakura's hangover not several months ago. Sakura didn't miss a beat, pretending to be unfazed by Sasuke's sudden unexpected passing, as if this was just as normal as Lee showing up to her house, apparently. What exactly happened? She inquired. It was an accident, Tenten explained from the other room, stuttering as she recovered from the shock of randomly seeing Sasuke here after so many years of absence. We were eating with Choji and Shikamaru, and Lee somehow got his drink mixed up with Shikamaru's. Next thing we knew, he was hanging from the rafters. Sasuke clutched the container with the yellow label marked, "See Wise POTUS," the same one that Sakura had indicated had been especially made for Lee's drunken fist. Next, Sasuke grabbed a glass from a nearby shelf and rotated it in his hand as he thought about that particular information Tenten just divulged. Mixed up drinks. With Shikamaru, of all people. Sasuke pursed his lips as he considered that in the context of recent events. Maybe the shinobi world and his latest interactions concerning the spiky-haired ninja had made him paranoid, but Sasuke scowled down at the reflective glass, overthinking the likelihood of that happening with the Hokage's right-hand assistant. Shikamaru was a genius, and to put it bluntly, didn't like the Uchiha. Sasuke didn't really care, because he didn't like him all that much either, but would he really go as far as to purposefully get Lee drunk, knowing it was a habit for Lee and his companions to seek Sakura's assistance? What would be the point of such a calculated move? To spy, to interrupt them, to wake Sakura so she would report to Kakashi, to remind her of her critical function in the leaf and her other male options. Sasuke wasn't going to assume any of that, but he wasn't going to entirely discredit it as paranoia either. Sakura didn't hesitate a second at Tenten's statement, saying, "Yes, this isn't the first time this sort of thing has happened." "Has he eaten anything?" "Yes," Tenten replied immediately. "He ate 2 plates before." She halted when Sasuke came back into the room. "This is what you need, correct?" Sasuke ignored them altogether, placing the glass of water and medication he held with one hand onto the table in front of the sofa. "Yes," Sakura answered him, not entirely sure whom Sasuke was addressing, but assuming it must have been her, since Sasuke paced to take up his usual shut-eyed spot against one of the walls, making no effort to talk to either of her guests. Sasuke wanted to tell them that they had gotten what they needed so they could leave now, but Sasuke was reminding himself to hold his tongue because he was trying to not come off as the asshole Shikamaru and the rest of Konoha 13 thought him to be. He may not be doing a very good job at it by blatantly ignoring them, but it was better than the annoyed words on his tongue. Tenten didn't seem to be too bothered by his predictable stony silence, because she said boldly, "So the rumors are true then." "You're back, Sasuke." Sasuke opened an eye to acknowledge her, giving her a polite but not out of character, "Not for long." He could have remained silent completely, but Sasuke supposed he didn't want to give the rest of Konoha any more reasons to hate him than they already had, especially those connected to Sakura. The medicine seemed to be working as Lee began to come out of his drunken haze slowly but surely. "Sakura," he whined again, slumping forward on the couch in her general direction. "I know hick that you love Sasuke and all, but hick," he didn't get further before Tenten slapped a hand over his mouth. "Don't say anything more," she chastised him, then turned to Sakura. "Sorry. He gets emotional and confrontational when he's like this. He doesn't mean half of what he says. Thank you for the medication, Sakura." I'll take him home now. Sasuke raised an eyebrow at the words that had come from Lee's mouth, and the challenging glare framed by those bushy brows of his. Confrontational when drunk. Indeed, Lee had acted completely different towards him several months back when he had met up with the caravan Lee had been escorting into the village. He had been full of the spirit of youth back then, and very enthusiastic to see Sasuke well. And for the first time since all those years ago, Sasuke remembered Lee's crush on Sakura. And with that memory, Sasuke suddenly had his answer to Sakura's question from earlier, too. The first time Sasuke had felt something other than camaraderie towards Sakura had to have been when Lee boldly, still was bold, apparently, confessed his love for her on that first day of the Chunin exams. And now that Sasuke held Lee's gaze, the Uchiha remembered that he had felt a deep annoyance for the ninja's admiration for Sakura, but it had all been eclipsed once Lee brought up the Uchiha clan and proceeded to challenge Sasuke to a fight. Sasuke had also overlooked his annoyance when Lee had stood up for Sakura in the Forest of Death at a time when Sasuke and Naruto had been incapacitated. It was for those same reasons that Sasuke chose to not say anything more now. He had always respected Lee, even if the bushy-browed ninja did still harbor affection for his wife. A couple months ago, Sasuke would have conceded to Lee for Sakura's attention, even going as far to push her in the other man's direction, knowing in his heart that Lee deserved her, would be good to her, and might even make her happy someday through his consistent presence, be Sakura's doting husband and the father of her children. Not now though. Whatever Lee had wanted to say to her tonight, it would have been 3 months too late anyway. Even Lee knew it, because the drunken man sighed as he made to stand, picking up the medication to take with him. Lee was removing the excuse to visit her himself, and they all recognized that intentional act. I'm sorry, Sakura, for bothering you again, especially at this hour. I'll try to be more careful in the future. You're no trouble, Lee. You can always come to me for help. You know that. Tell Shikamaru to be more careful with his drink placement, next time. Sasuke glanced at Sakura at that statement. He supposed that he wasn't the only one who squinted their eyes a bit at the circumstances of tonight. And even though Sakura had offered Lee her continued assistance, Lee had still taken the medication with him. And Sakura didn't insist he leave it behind. They didn't talk about Lee, or much of anything after the two ninja left, really. Sakura had felt uncomfortable, but firm in her practices whenever the two members of Team Guy had arrived at her door. She had to admit she was a little surprised that Sasuke had retrieved Lee's medication from her cabinet like he was as familiar with Lee's drunken care as she was, placing it down on the table for him in her stead. But then again, the Uchiha had done stranger, bolder things in the last couple months that had surprised her more. Sakura knew Sasuke well enough to know why he had done it, doing his best to casually, but firmly reveal their relationship to Tenten and Lee. He didn't have to come out of that bathroom, and Sakura hadn't expected him to. She raced against the growing hour, throwing things randomly into a travel sack, already determined to leave with him. Sasuke watched her stonily with pursed, tense lips. She ignored him, knowing the Uchiha was still having second thoughts about asking her to continue their traveling together even in this moment. She wasn't going to give him another out. I want to check in with Kakashi once more before we leave, she announced for a second time, moving through the motions of packing, just as she had done several months prior, and not really paying that much attention to what she was throwing in the bag. Sakura. Sasuke tried, but Sakura anticipated his words and cut him off instantly. I don't want to hear it. The Otsutsuki, he began again, refusing not to try one last time to emphasize the primary threat they'd be facing together from this point on. Can go to hell, she finished, handing him her rucksack before boldly fisting her hands behind his neck, her palms sliding to the forefront of his cheekbones. In the dim pre-dawn, lantern-lit hour, Sakura searched both of his eyes. We get to be selfish. The window that they had left open all night long, gave them one last Konoha breeze, the cicadas of the previous evening now silent. Not even they wanted to disturb this quiet solitude, but Sakura had to be the one to set things into motion. For the second time this year, she would tell Kakashi that she was leaving. Sasuke closed the space between them, taking that kiss that had been interrupted earlier, and Sakura knew this was his way of saying, okay. Let's do this, then. His mouth was warm and Sakura desperately wanted to climb back into that bed, kiss him into the dawn, and listen to the night give way to birdsong. But Sakura wanted to follow him the rest of the way toward accomplishing his mission more. To her surprise, Sasuke broke the kiss, he too prepared for the imminent future. She knew he was eager to be gone from Konoha and to resume the hunt for the Otsutsuki. Meet me at the gates, she asked, already gasping, but holding her breath like she could cling to the quiet presence shared between them if she did so. I'll meet you there. And Sakura assumed he had simply agreed. Donning her white doctor's coat, she sprinted off into the night, heading toward the spot Sakura knew Kakashi would be. The pink-haired Kunoichi once again left her home with a silent farewell, the residents a loyal and waiting fortitude that would forever preserve the short Konoha chapters of their lifelong story together. Kakashi was a world-class ninja, and being a ninja, was not in the habit of being snuck up upon, especially here. It was common for the Hokage to upgrade into more secure housing once they became officially titled as the head of the village, but Kakashi had reallocated the Hokage's quarters for other purposes recently, taking up residence in his old apartment instead. He had meant what he had said this morning about running out of space to house all the individuals flooding into the Leaf Village. He had given up the Hokage quarters to shocked refugees a month ago, preferring to keep his old discreet lodgings for himself. To everyone else's knowledge but a select few, he had simply upgraded to something more private. He sat up at the knock, wondering which of those select few had decided to interrupt his sleep, and then shot out of bed as he registered the night out his window. Because if the Hokage was being sought out at this hour, it must be an emergency. But when he opened the door, Kakashi's anxiety skyrocketed for an entirely different reason. It was Sakura on the other side of it. He looked down at her. Her determined expression as she stared into his chest was all he needed to see to know exactly why she was here. He sighed and rubbed the back of his neck. I'm leaving, his pink-haired student blurted out, like it had taken her significant courage to do so. And in a smaller guilty sort of voice, added, again. I guessed as much, Kakashi admitted, opening the door for her to come inside. The action gave her pause and Kakashi knew she was thinking he was inviting her inside because his goal would be to talk her out of it. She met his eyes to try to read his face and her emerald irises widened. Kakashi sleepily raised a curious brow when her hand went to cover her mouth. Your mask, it's OFF. Remembering suddenly that he had chosen to forego the mask while he slept, Kakashi clutched Sakura's wrist and pulled her the rest of the way inside. When the door was shut behind her, he released her and rubbed the back of his neck awkwardly. I typically sleep with it off, in the privacy of my own home. Sakura stumbled over her words, her eyes the size of full moons and mouth hung open like the door he had just slammed to avoid prying eyes. Why do you even wear that mask when you have a face like that, sensei? He turned his back on her in search of said mask, cringing internally that she had seen him without it. It doesn't fit me, this face, he admitted, finding the cowl and pulling it down over his chin and nose. It's my father's face. The face of the White Fang. You don't want to see it? She asked, moving more fully into the room. It was a labyrinth of books, paperwork, and gifts from the citizens of Konoha. He hadn't known what to do with such items, but didn't want to throw them out either, feeling it to be highly disrespectful to do so. So, it had become his surroundings, the insulation of his small apartment. No, he confessed, as unaffected by emotion as possible. Then avoid reflective surfaces, but don't do the rest of the world a disservice. He laughed then, enjoying his young student's playful humor. He would never live this down, she'd never see him the same. Which is precisely why he would wear it to the grave. Kakashi had initially worn it for the reasons he had confessed to Sakura, but it had also just become a part of his persona. Like a pair of glasses or an Anbu mask, Kakashi had grown accustomed to the pressure on his face and now preferred the comfort of something so consistent. It didn't hurt his shinobi reputation, either, to wear an elusive, intimidating mask. It separated him from his father, distinctly characterizing him as his own person to others. It was quite literally stitched into his identity. But seriously, Sakura continued, find someone to show yourself to, sensei. Just because you're Hokage doesn't mean you need to be alone. Kakashi sighed again, rubbing the back of his neck. Is this what it felt like when he interfered in his students' love lives? Not really interested in anything of the sort, he confessed. Living vicariously through my students is quite enough. Sakura wasn't backing down, it seemed, pointing a finger in his direction. Don't act like you're not just as bad as Jiraiya, Kakashi-sensei. You read nothing but make-out tactics for years. He coughed loudly, suddenly confronted with a behavior that had never been a secret. Everyone knew how much he enjoyed that book series. A healthy outlet, he excused, for a loveless life. Before she could say anything more, Kakashi turned the tables on her. It seems you and Sasuke, however, have chosen to continue traveling together. When do you leave? She went from teasing back to serious as she came forward and stood a little straighter. Sunrise. In just a couple hours, then. That soon. Kakashi supposed that this was going to be his last chance alone with Sakura to express his concerns before she inevitably followed the Uchiha back into the wilderness. Sakura, he began, and he saw her physically brace herself as she searched his eyes for the words he had yet to speak. I have wished for nothing more than you and Sasuke to be happy. Seeing you both choose each other was the highlight of my year, I promise you. But, she ducked her head. I was afraid there might be a but this time. Recently, there has been some tension where Sasuke is concerned, Kakashi stated, but Sakura interrupted him. I already know, she confessed. Shikamaru told me. Kakashi squinted his eyes as he considered that, knowing that his assistant would have not been soft in his delivery of their mutual concerns. He sighed, wishing Shikamaru would have let Kakashi be the one to do so first as the leader of Team 7. He supposed Shikamaru had little faith Kakashi would address it at all for that very reason. But it's not like that in Kakashi. Naruto and I, she began, but Kakashi waved her panicking declarations away. I know what you're going to say, he came forward and placed a hand on her shoulder groundingly. And I still extend my congratulations to you both. I am happy for you, Sakura. But this time, I'm going to also extend a word of caution. She waited for it, and Kakashi could hear her breath catching, her chest tightening as if waiting for impact. I came to the conclusion that Sasuke's threat wasn't ingenuine like Naruto claims it to be, he said, and Sakura's wide eyes jumped to him. I think Sasuke will always struggle with his nature, and there is always the possibility of his relapse. She shook her head, attempting to resume Sasuke's defense, but Kakashi finished his speech with, however, I am choosing to have faith, just as Sasuke is, himself, that you and Naruto are enough security in the instance that one of Team the 7th of May eventually, heaven forbid, be lost. I think that, too, Kakashi. But it will never come to that. Sasuke vowed to me last night that he would never become that way again, even if Team 7. But it's not only Team 7 that I am concerned about, Sakura, Kakashi confessed, steeling himself to admit to her what he had silently worried about ever since the Uchiha's declarations in Sunagaku. As much as he didn't want to, Kakashi was going to bring it up. He wanted her prepared. He wanted Sasuke prepared. I don't understand. A child, Sakura. In the eclipsing mist lurking darkness, Sasuke traced his fingers along the Uchiha memorial, finding Itachi's name carved into the plaque at the bottom. Sasuke hadn't understood until now that whoever had created the memorial had listed each member of the Uchiha clan massacre and saw it fit to add Uchiha Itachi despite his role in their deaths. Sasuke was surprised to find it there, knowing that those who had died by his hand deserved their own plaque apart from their murderer. But whoever had designed it had added Itachi, and Sasuke couldn't think of any other reason other than that. At the end of the day, it had been determined Itachi was a victim of the Uchiha massacre, too. There weren't many people who knew about Itachi's secret, which led Sasuke to conclude once again that Kakashi was responsible for this memorial. Sasuke had missed it the first time he had visited several months ago, but seeing it now made a flicker of guilt spark inside him about his behavior towards Kakashi the past few days. He was still angry with him about his recent actions regarding Sakura, but he appreciated him all the same for his efforts to maintain and honor their rocky back and forth relationship. Sasuke sighed as he traced his older brother's name, feeling like he was visiting his grave for the first time despite the fact that Itachi's body didn't lay beneath his feet. How incredible it was that a simple name engraved on stone suddenly became like an open conduit to one's lost soul where there hadn't been one before. Like an unexpected winter wind that whipped around you, the ghosts of the past arrived to surround Sasuke, the one from their clan who had survived, the one who had tried to avenge them. They stared back at him now, shadows of their former selves with hollow eyes pacing around Sasuke to survey just what kind of the man the last living Uchiha became. He fixated on the silhouettes of his imagination that felt like home as his fingers found his mother's and father's name placed beside one another on the monument just as they had left this world side by side. Mother, he whispered, father, uttering those words for the first time since the night they had left his throat in screams. I don't feel so alone anymore. I'm going to be my own man from now on. I'm going to make my own choices for myself, now. Wherever you are right now, I hope you're together. Sasuke suddenly looked up into the eyes of a grim funeral bird, a crow landing to perch on the top of the memorial, a figment in the darkness that cocked its head in evaluative listening. Sasuke stilled, imagining his brother in its place, perched on top of that gravestone and looking down at him with a bone-chilling, Sasuke. And you, Itachi, Sasuke whispered among those pacing shadows, acknowledging the ghost above him. I hope wherever you are, you're finally free, and that your sacrifice paid for an afterlife of happiness. In the end, I don't think I want to be like you, Itachi. You gave up all the things you wanted and dreamed about, and for what? You manipulated Itachi. Your sacrifice was for the benefit of a crazed man. I killed him for what he did to you. The crow tilted its head as it listened. It cawed loudly whenever Sasuke fell silent. Sasuke continued, saying, instead of living a life of complete sacrifice, I think I want to simply live my life by doing what's right. I want some of that happiness now, in the present. The cawing turned to words of warning that Sasuke heard in the chambers of his heart. The Uchiha cannot determine what is right. Their emotions cloud their judgment. The Uchiha have always brought about destruction by conceding to their selfish desires. Selfishness will be your downfall. Sasuke scowled at the talking bird, shaking his head in denial at the very words that haunted his heart like his brother's ghost did now. I have Naruto and Sakura to live by. I'll stand by their sides to protect the village. I'll choose what they choose. I won't become what I was. Never again. I'll spend the rest of my life proving you wrong. Proving everyone else wrong. The bird did not speak, but its black beady eye surveyed him carefully as mist curled around them, as if the creature before him possessed a sight beyond the abilities of the Rinnegan. Sasuke suddenly felt exposed as it seized him with otherworldly measure, as if it could discern the very colors of the sins that stained his soul. As if it could scry into the various futures that could manifest according to Sasuke's life-altering decisions. Sasuke doubled down, convincing his brother and vowing to himself. I'll hunt the Otsutsuki because I want to protect my loved ones and the leaf, not because I want to live up to your legacy of martyrdom. I don't want to live in the name of vengeance, in the name of sacrifice, or in the name of losses anymore. I think I want to live for myself. I want to live for the ones who remain. Is that so terrible? And the crow tilted its head in contemplation, before croaking, maybe you're different. Maybe your ties will save you, Sasuke. Maybe you can be selfish if your selfishness means living for others. Maybe it is love that will keep you from falling after all. It was my love for you that sustained me. And then Sasuke imagined that the crow bowed its royal head, a show of the black plumage crown of the Grim, before it cawed in finality, flapping its magnificent wings and bursting from its haunting roost in a loud cacophony that startled the souls of the grave back into the mist of the morning. Sasuke wasn't sure what sort of answer he was given, or if he had imagined the entire conversation altogether, but he felt lighter. He felt righted in his downward spiral. That feeling of lightness continued as the stripe of sun began its rise on the horizon, the warmth of the sun casting out the chill of shadows in his mind as Sasuke headed to that spot. It was its own kind of haunting, that expanse of cobblestone parallel the stone bench on the only road out of the village. The very place where he and Sakura's first real confrontation took place and the spot where they had met multiple times since. Just a few months ago, it was the exact same location that Sakura had pretty much told Sasuke he wasn't leaving her behind again. She had chosen to follow without his initial permission. But this time was different. This time, Sasuke wanted to face the ghost of it as he had his brothers, the painful memory he had created there. This time he would rewrite his wrongs in their history. Except that lightness one from earlier was replaced with unease when Sasuke got there as the sunrise fully cast its violet banner in the sky, and Sakura wasn't there waiting for him. Activating his visual prowess, he looked down the path back toward the heart of the village, but did not even see the essence of her. Was this how Sakura had felt that night? Waiting for Sasuke to arrive and fearing that something was wrong. Just as she had done for him all those years ago, Sasuke would wait for her because he knew she would come. And he realized suddenly how easy it had been to tell Naruto yesterday that Sakura would be staying behind in the leaf where she belonged, but how impossible it now seemed to face such a reality. The Uchiha wasn't leaving without her. Sakura had carried Kakashi's words like weight in her chest as she had clambered into the medical labs at 5 in the morning with a newfound vigor. It's not my place to pray like this, he had begun when Sakura's shock had left her speechless. But as your sensei who knows all three of you best, would you or Naruto be enough insurance for Sasuke, or even you for that matter, if for some reason, a child, your child, was lost to the both of you? You're right, Kakashi-sensei. That really isn't anyone's business, she had responded steadily and formally. No one else is being asked what you're about to ask me to do, or rather, do without. Kakashi had begun a long stream of consciousness in an attempt to clarify. I don't want to make you promise such a thing, Sakura. There's nothing I want more for you than that. But I just want you to consider the answer to that question first. You're not responsible for the path Sasuke takes from now on, so don't mistake my words for that or let Shikamaru convince you that you are. I wholeheartedly support your choice to pursue this newfound happiness, as Naruto put it. We can leave the future in the future. I don't intend to burden you with my worries, but I want you to be informed of the stakes at hand, to protect yourself. Sasuke's reaction was intense, to say the least. And I know you, Sakura. You'd throw away your life to protect him, side with him, or even stop him. Despite what you are to him now, know your worth to the rest of your loved ones. The entire shinobi world of medicine has advanced from your contributions alone. You are so much more than Sasuke Uchiha's lover or his children's mother. Sakura's eyes had watered at that, her steely resolve softening at her sensei's uplifting articulation. I know, Kakashi. I know what you're trying to say, but you don't have to worry. I'm being careful. I'm not taking any chances right now either. But I can't help myself, Kakashi. I can't walk away from him indefinitely. Her sensei had nodded, accepting her answer before his expression had turned a different sort of heavy. The speech concerning Sasuke had been fatherly. This sort of look on his face morphed into a sadness of regret. He had proceeded to apologize to her for allowing her to go after the Zenshin organization alone back in Suna, saying, "I shouldn't have allowed you to put yourself in any situation where you might have compromised yourself or felt pressured to, for the sake of the village." Sakura had blushed embarrassingly at his apology. "Oh Kakashi, I didn't. That's not what Uchiha Sasuke said to me." Sakura had waved his concerns away. "You know how dramatic he is. I had it under control. I didn't do anything extreme. Sasuke wouldn't be angry without cause. He has a right to be angry with me about it. I should have never agreed to let anyone use such a disguise, especially one of my own." She had left shortly after, but not before the Zenshin organization, and those that continued to hunt her at a distance, were discussed in full. She had tried to listen to the Hokage's concerns, plans, and questions carefully, but Sakura's brain was planning for the now. Her time had been ticking and honestly, she was sick of caring about the organization known as Zenshin. They had come at her carelessly, unprepared, and with an underestimation of Sakura. She would deal with them when they came to find her again despite how proactive the Hokage was on her behalf. To Kakashi's chagrin, Sakura had expressed as much before parting with a tight hug around her sensei's waist, a special request to keep an affectionate eye on Isao in her absence, and running toward the hospital. Sakura didn't know where they were headed next or for how long, but she wanted to have everything in order. She made more chakra pills even though she had made a batch before leaving Suna, medical supplies for injuries, capsulized more of the antidepressant, H. Perforatum, for further study, and yes, even more contraceptives for both Sasuke and herself. Kunoichi hadn't lied to Kakashi when she said she was being careful. Sakura had started her doses before leaving Suna and had consistently taken them, and now Sasuke was, too. She hadn't chosen to do so for the sake of fearing Sasuke's future, or because she was under the sick impression that they should sacrifice their happiness in order to protect any part of the shinobi world from Sasuke. She just wanted them both to be ready, and she knew that Sasuke clearly wasn't any sort of ready from their conversations in the cave alone. She'd cross any other bridges when she came to them. Taking a note from Sasuke's handbook, Sakura began sealing all of her items within a concealment scroll for easier transport. She had just finished finalizing another canvas bundle of medicines and placing it in the scrolls, when she heard the birdsong. Glancing over at the window, Sakura was greeted with the flush of dawn. Stripping her leaf medical attire and abandoning it in her office, Sakura clutched the scroll and ran. It was such an odd sensation, racing the fuchsia sunrise, pounding your feet down a stone path you had walked countless times, but now it miraculously felt different. It felt like a path to him. Before, it had been the path Sasuke had chosen to use to walk away from her that night and had done so several times since. She hadn't been able to walk it a single time in his absence without remembering the pain of that night. But suddenly, it was like it had thawed from time, as if it were beginning at the sunrise after that night, picking up where it had left off and resuming what it always should have been. It should have always been a path they took together. Sakura didn't realize just how nervous she was that he might not have waited for her, until she saw him. Cloaked in black, traveling poncho once again adorned, and Sakura's pack on his shoulder, a relieved sort of expression passing his features as he saw her. To be honest, Sakura hadn't expected to see him there, standing exactly where she had all those years ago and where they had rendezvoused once more a few months ago. It clicked for her then, what Sasuke had meant by, "I'll meet you there." Not at the gates as she had requested, but here. This spot. Before she could stop herself, tears pricked her eyes at the significance. She wiped them away as she came to a stop before him, panting from the run. He sighed with a raised eyebrow and Sakura laughed slightly, assuming that he was annoyed at her tardiness. She didn't care. She was high on the exhilaration of now and immediately chirped an old nostalgic excuse that also happened to be the truth. "Sorry I'm late. Got lost on the path of life." There was a mischievous poke to her forehead and Sakura rubbed it with a smile. Never took you for picking up on Kakashi's bad habits. I thought something must have happened. You did say sunrise, didn't you? Yeah, I know. I was prepping some medical supplies, she smiled. She felt stupid for how much she was smiling. We can go now. I'm ready. She made to walk past him, giddy with the love she felt for this man and the excitement of their continued journey, however long or short it would be. How different this scenario was playing out from the past. But Sasuke grabbed her fingers lightly with his own. Wait, he breathed, a whisper on the birdsong dawn that no one would be able to hear but herself. I wanted to tell you something. She turned, that elation coming down like the fall of adrenaline. I wanted to tell you that if I could make the choice over that night. Sakura shook her head immediately, wind-blown hair brushing her cheeks as she did so. I would have you make the same choices, she confessed. Because it led us to the here and now. I do not wish you would have chosen differently, Sasuke, even though it was painful. He smiled sadly, before adding, I've decided something, today. My reason for living is not revenge this time. After all these years, I think I am finally like you and Naruto. Our paths will still be different, but maybe we can walk together sometimes, share them along the way. Like our orbits. And Sakura knew he was referring to the words of that painful night. The words were written into the memory of her soul. My words from that night have not changed, she smiled. I still think that I can make you happy. I know that you won't be able to stay in Konoha with me like I had begged you to. And I can't promise you that every day will be fun and happy, but sometimes it is better than nothing. I'm attempting to rewrite one of my most shameful moments, he continued, confidence increasing with her adoring words. This time, I'm asking you to come with me. What if you regret it? She teased, squeezing his fingers with her own. I've been told quite often that I can be annoying. I don't see that ever changing, he deadpanned, grunting as he received an elbow to the ribs. I'm not sticking my nose into your business. You most definitely are. He dodged her next jab, grabbing her wrist and bringing her closer to him. But I want you to. After a moment of staring into one another's mirthful eyes, flushed with daybreak, Sasuke released her and Sakura nodded down the path to the gates. Then let's go. He agreed, shouldering her pack just as he did months ago. Kakashi wasn't a snoop, but he had to, see it for himself. He hadn't been exaggerating when he had told Sakura he was vicariously living through his students. That moment where Sasuke had reached for her fingers with his own had been a breakthrough in Kakashi's mind about Sasuke's character. His words had been too hushed, and Kakashi was now without the Sharingan to make out what they were saying, but he knew his students well enough to see it for himself, the tenderness, the regret, and the love they had for one another. Not to mention the degree of playfulness between them that Kakashi hadn't even witnessed between their genin selves. And, Kakashi couldn't believe his eyes as they walked away. Was that the Uchiha crest on Sakura's back? He blinked, even going as far as to rub his old, now Sharingan-less, eyes. It sure as hell was. Those two sneaks, Kakashi laughed to himself. Well, he now sort of felt like his speech earlier had been a bit pointless. It wasn't a matter of if they had a family together, but a matter of when. If Sasuke's feelings had grown enough where the Uchiha had actually gone as far as to marry her despite his resolution of independent atonement, then he would probably do pretty much anything for that woman. And Kakashi knew Sakura and the dreams she had for herself. Kakashi both sighed and smiled as he shook his head in disbelief and awe. It wasn't only Kakashi who had been a silent spectator. 8 Anbu landed beside him, the very Anbu Kakashi had detailed to follow Sakura while she was in the village. His concern for her safety rivaled the boys at this point. The Zenshin who wanted her life was still out there. The Anbu were silent witnesses to the pair's exchange as well, as they stood beside Kakashi, waiting for their new orders now that Sakura was leaving the village with Sasuke. Once his students were out of sight behind the Leaf Village gates, Kakashi performed the summoning seal. There was the telltale proof of materialization, a cloud of white revealing Kakashi's 8 ninja hounds. Pakun, perched upon Bull's massive head, looked up at Kakashi past his graying muzzle and misty eyes. Aren't we a little too old to be summoned for work? Pakun complained. When's your retirement again? Not getting here fast enough, Kakashi answered before saying, I hate to ask for your help. But this has gotten personal. Kakashi divided the hounds amongst the Anbu present, giving precise orders for each 4-cell team. 2 dogs per 2 Anbu was the goal, creating 4 teams total with the ability to move discreetly but have enough support within the squad, operating just as a Leaf Village shinobi team. 1 orange-haired Anbu remained after the others received their orders and dispersed, Pakun quickly attaching himself to the ninja's shoulder. I want to hunt the Zenshin who remain, Kakashi informed him. Even if it takes us outside of the village. We will have to be discreet as a whole. Can I count on you to lead this mission and report on these 4 teams? It would be my honor, Lord Hokage. I would do almost anything for Sakura-san. Kakashi raised an eyebrow at that, marking the distinct fox-shaped Anbu mask and orange hair. There were several ninjas sporting that color of hair, but Kakashi had a hunch as to who it might be. A ninja with the surname Mizuno. Kakashi knew him to be one of Chino's exploding human bomb burn victims, and assumed his filial sentiments toward Sakura were due to her recent treatment of his burns. Give any remaining members you discover the same options she gave the others, the Hokage ordered. They can spend imprisonment here or be transported to Sunagaku to the case cage. There is no third option. Yes, Lord Hokage. Where to now? Sakura asked Sasuke once they were at the crossroads out of the village and Sasuke came to an abrupt stop. She took the opportunity to tuck the scroll she had been carrying into the side pocket of her bag that Sasuke had refused to relinquish over to her twice now. He had plans to store it in his own scrolls soon, and it wasn't a burden, he had claimed when she tried to take it. Sasuke didn't miss a beat, saying his next words as if it were the most normal conclusion. Orochimaru's hideout. Sakura, however, tripped over her own feet and came to a stumbling halt. Did she just hear him correctly? Wait, what? Why? The Uchiha kept walking down the forest path, seemingly unbothered by her obvious worry, but Sakura quickly caught up to him and grabbed his right arm, gently guiding his body back around to face her. She searched his eyes before identifying the resolution in them. Her shoulders sank at finding it there. This meant that Sasuke knew she would object, but he had a plan in place and was set on it. Is this for your mission? She inquired, mentally preparing to see that slimy snake of a devil who had taken Sasuke from her all those years ago if it meant furthering Sasuke's goal to find the Otsutsuki. What could Orochimaru possibly have to add to the search? Sasuke removed the emotion from his mask, slipping into the Uchiha persona she knew as the shinobi elite that could and would help save the world. No, I meant what I said about finding the remaining members of Zenshin who are after you. There's someone there that can help me do that. Wait. Sakura raised a hand to stop his explanation, a specific red-haired ninja who could identify someone by their chakra coming to the forefront of her mind. He couldn't mean that woman, could he? Just wait a second. You can't talk me out of it, Sakura. Listen, she began, sighing as this topic was brought up yet again. Kakashi's on it. He plans to hunt them down himself. Sasuke turned to continue walking, unfazed by this knowledge. He won't get far, because I'll beat him to it. She stumbled in front of him, blocking his path with an awkward rub to her neck. Can we not do this? She implored. Please. He sighed in exasperation. You want me to just forget about those still after you? Not do anything about it at all? Yes. What kind of man, and partner for that matter, do you take me for? The kind of man who has already put off his own goals for my sake for a month and a half now. Come on, let's leave it to Kakashi, and if Zenshin shows up, we can deal with them at that point. He glared at her as her hands found his waist, reaching up under his poncho and tangling her fingers at his back, bringing their bodies close together. It was a method of entreating him that she had used a couple times now. "That's not going to work," he hissed, an embarrassed blush staining his cheeks despite his harsh words. "I'm not worried about them, and you shouldn't take on that burden either. You have a different burden, and as long as I am with you, I'll be out of harm's way. Let's just leave it all behind, remove ourselves from the equation while Kakashi and his team handle the rest." It was her turn to blush when the fabric of Sasuke's poncho came down over her head, entrapping her like a child under a blanket. His smirking face was peeking down into the neck of the fabric as she looked up at him with a crumbling glower of her own. Her smile spread free at her success. This was definitely working. "Kakashi's got hounds tracking them," she said again. "They're better at that sort of thing than anyone you have in mind anyway. So, let's just forget them, yeah." Sakura did not want Sasuke going anywhere near Orochimaru or Karen. She knew that both of the rogue ninja had helped at the end of the war, but Orochimaru was still suspicious enough of a character that the Leaf kept 24-hour surveillance on him and his activity. Not to mention, how absolutely traumatized she was of him. And Karen, well, Sakura knew how the woman had felt about Sasuke at one point in time and didn't really feel like facing that awkwardness anytime soon. So where to next? She practically pleaded as Sasuke searched her eyes and raised a suspicious brow. Did he know where her thoughts had gone? After a moment, the Uchiha sighed, and Sakura immediately felt 10 times lighter. The plan after that was to head north, to the land of snow. Sakura tiptoed, popping her head through the neck of his poncho like a curious mole sticking its nose above ground. The land of snow. The environmental conditions of the Sunagakur Desert helped connect me to Keigaya's desert realm, Sasuke explained, staring down into her face as he did so. It made bypassing the central dimension altogether possible with the help of your chakra pills. In theory, bypassing the center dimension for Keigaya's ice realm would be achievable if I could find a similar environment. The land of snow is the coldest place in the shinobi world. Excellent, she piped, already dreaming of snowy landscapes and sub-degree temperatures. She recalled their time in the land of snow as genin fondly, remembering that the land had a seasonal spring now that rivaled the beauty of its frosty contrast. She teased Sasuke by pretending to go in for a kiss, before retreating from his poncho and tossing it over his head just as he had done to her. To the land of snow it is, then. Clutching the fabric with one hand, he dragged the material back down his face, mussing his wrapped head of hair as he did so, and revealing another smirking scowl. She heard him mumble something about her being the death of him as she turned and marched north before he could begin walking toward Orochimaru's hideout. Thanks for watching.